Welcome everyone to the Planning Board meeting of November 10th, 2002. Note that the meeting is being recorded. On the agenda tonight, we will start with the moratorium on housing. Will be our first agenda item, and after that we have a number of public hearings listed, but I want to note that two of those public hearings have been continued. Those are the 225 Pond Street special permit and site plan review. That is the McDonald's building. And the other one is 301 Pond Street special permit and site plan review. That is the proposed housing in the Shaw's Plaza. That will not be, those two public hearings will not be discussed tonight. They will be continued to a later date. The public hearing that will take place tonight is for 501 Pond Street. But first, before we get started with other items on our agenda, we have a clerk's report. Kate, do you have anything for us tonight?
Yes, Madam Chair. Since the last planning board meeting on 10/27, we have received 4 written correspondence. We have received 4 correspondence on the moratorium that we discussed tonight. So one of those was prior to this batch, and we have received 2 on 501 Pond, 1 since the last meeting.
Great, thank you. Just in case it is a procedural matter, Emily H., do you have a question that is unrelated to any of the topics on the agenda? If not, perhaps your hand is raised by accident? Hello, Emily?
Yes.
Did you have a question related to procedure?
No, I don't.
Okay, I think your hand is accidentally raised.
Oh, I don't know how to take it out. Oh, okay.
I'm lowering your hand, Emily.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
We can do it by force. Thank you. All right. All right. In that case, we're going to begin the public hearing for zoning article 9.7 multifamily building moratorium. I am going to, as I am suffering from a cough and need to save my voice for later on in the meeting, I'm going to turn over the majority of this part of things to fellow Vice Chair Anna Tesmaninsky, to be assisted by our town planner, Peter Matchek. So Anna, I think Michael Herbert has a presentation, but I'm going to turn it over to you. Thanks, Anna.
Okay. So, Peter, do we need to formally open the public hearing?
So procedurally, yes, at 7:15, we're going to open. Well, now it's 7:22. And I would procedurally like to read the proposed bylaw amendment into the record, if possible. So thank you so much. So at 7, Town Planner Peter Matchek. Hello, everybody. Good evening. Tonight at 7:32, excuse me, 7:23, the Ashland Planning Board will hold a public hearing to see if the town will vote to amend the Town of Ashland bylaws, Chapter 282, to delete Section 9.7 as the section has expired, into place, and in its place add the following language: Section 9.7 multifamily building moratorium. Number 9.7.1, the purpose. Since 2010, the town of Ashland has experienced substantial and rapid growth in residential housing. In 2010, the town of Ashland had 6,581 units. And in 2020, that number has grown to 7,495. At least 544 of those units are multifamily rental developments. Between 2020 and 2022 are another, 180 multifamily units have been permitted. There are currently 3 applications, including 494 multifamily units pending before the Ashland Planning Review. Such rapid growth has placed considerable strain on municipal resources, ranging from sewer and water services, emergency services, roadway repairs, town stormwater management, and educational services. Given the limitation on the taxable given the limitations on the allowable tax levy under General Law C-59, the town is disabled from funding adequate services to support its growing housing stock. Failing to provide adequate services poses adverse impact to the health, safety, and welfare of the residents, including the inability, number one, to provide safety and adequate roadways and other infrastructure. Number two, to ensure that the schools are not overcrowded. And three, to maintain adequate staffing and equipment for the Ashland Police and Fire Departments, to allow the town to implement adequate policies, regulations, and bylaws, and to invest in necessary infrastructure, which will enable the town to ensure that adequate municipal services may be provided to all residents. The provision of this bylaw employs temporary, restrictions on the issuance of building permits and multifamily residential developments. 9.72, applicability. This bylaw prohibits any development for which a building permit has not been issued or a complete special permit application has not yet been submitted for approval as of November 16, 2022 for any new multifamily dwelling project or any mixed-use project which includes multifamily dwelling, all as defined herewithin on any one or more lots in any district by right or by special permit. Section 9.73 term. The term of this bylaw shall expire at midnight at the end of December 31st, 2024. The proposed zoning article has been published as Article 7 on the special town meeting warrant to be held on Wednesday, November 16th, 2022 at 7 o'clock. And that meeting will be held at the Ashland High School. So right now, procedurally, the public hearing is now open and we can start the public hearing process. I hand it over to Tricia, I have to let somebody in the meeting. And I believe Mr. Michael Herbert, town manager, has a presentation. At this current time, Michael Herbert is a co-host and has the ability to share his screen.
Thank you, Pete. Ann, is it okay if I just proceed?
Absolutely. I think that's the right step. And then we'll allow the planning board to ask Michael some questions, and obviously we'll hear from the public as well. But absolutely, Michael, you can go ahead and start.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you to the planning board for allowing me to come here tonight and present on this topic. The subject is, as was described, a building moratorium on multifamily developments that is defined as 3 units or more on a single lot here in the town of Ashland for a 2-year period. As we all know, we've seen a proliferation recently of multifamily units, not just in Ashland, but throughout Metro West and actually throughout the state. And when I say multifamily units, I'm referring to either apartment complexes or condo developments. Both of those constitute multifamily developments. So we've seen, and I'll go through the data a little bit here soon, but we've seen an increase in those units, especially over the last 10 years. The planning board currently has a number of projects before it going through the permitting process. And more importantly, and why this is so timely, is you hear rumors and rumblings and hear concerns about future developers submitting applications over and above what is currently before the planning board right now. So again, I really appreciate you having this public hearing at this time. So let's see if I can share my screen. Can everybody see this okay?
Nope.
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 Okay.
Now we can see it.
Oh, great. I am technically challenged, so I always get a little nervous when I hear things aren't working right. Again, I went through the introduction here just for everybody's education here. This is a zoning bylaw that would be presented at the special town meeting next Wednesday on November 16th, starting at 7 p.m. at the Ashland High School auditorium. So first, I'll just take a couple minutes to define what is a building moratorium, especially as it's presented through this warrant article. So a building moratorium is a 2-year pause on issuing building permits for apartment buildings and condo developments. Again, those are otherwise known as multifamily buildings. It doesn't have to be 2 years. You can be flexible on the time period. But you can't have it for a permanent ban on multifamily units or any kind of development for that matter. The definition of a multifamily building is, excuse me, this is a mistake. It's 3 or more units on a single lot, not 2 or more. If it's 2 or less, it would still be allowed. That would be a duplex. I mentioned before that there are several projects that are before the planning board right now, and so legally, we can't apply this moratorium retroactively. So we cannot apply it to projects that have submitted a complete special permit application before November 16th. However, I had established on September 16th a sewer moratorium. And so projects that have applied or submitted an application after that September 16th date are subject to that sewer moratorium. So not the building moratorium, but they will not have the ability to hook up to sewer and therefore really would not be able to move forward with their project. So, you know, it's an obvious question, I think, but something that we should discuss a bit. You know, why would we want to have a building moratorium? Well, as I mentioned in the beginning, we have seen, like I said, a proliferation of housing units over the last 20 years. Again, not just in Ashland, but in Metro West. But obviously, we're concerned about Ashland right now. And we haven't really had an opportunity to take the time to get more information on what the impacts are on our infrastructure, our schools, our finances and services. And when I talk about infrastructure, I'm referring to things like our roads, our water and sewer infrastructure. And when I talk about services, I'm talking about things like our police and fire department's ability to respond to any emergencies. Also, the DPW, their ability to respond to any kind of road concerns or any issues that might come up. So again, this would give us an opportunity to get more information on those impacts, which I think is really, really important for a more robust discussion over the next couple of years. It gives us an opportunity to look at development patterns and our reliance on new growth revenue to sustain the budget. So just briefly, when new developments are built, it means that the town will receive new tax revenue from new growth. So not tax revenue, which is based on an increase of our current taxpayers, but it would be new tax levies that would be new taxes added to the tax base from these developments. And typically, or historically, I should say, we have utilized new growth in order to sustain our budget. Instead of using other methods. And then perhaps most importantly, this coincides with an initiative to create a comprehensive plan for our community. This is something that the select board and the planning board have really worked on over the last several months. And there's a lot of excitement about it, a lot of anticipation and again, just interest in developing a long-term plan moving forward. And so we expect that to start also in January as well. In fact, at the special town meeting, our first article, part of that is going to be to allocate money towards that comprehensive plan. So I talked a little bit about the increase or impact on services and the ability for us to get more information over this 2-year period where, well, building is paused. But have been able to put a little bit of information together utilizing the information that I had.
I can get it. I guess not.
So, so first, I'll just start with just a simple count of the units that have come online since 2004, and this includes not only multifamily units but single-family homes as well. And so, since 2004 to 2023. Which, you know, obviously we're not even there yet. This is based on fiscal year. Fiscal year 23 starts in July 22 and ends in June 23. So we got part of a year there. So we've seen an increase of 1,363 total housing units, again, since 2004. We have gone from a little over 6,000 in 2004 to slightly under 7,500 in, again, 2022, 2023. Now, during a 10-year period between 2010 and 2020, 802 units have been multifamily units. And since that time, there has also been permitted another 180 unit age-restricted development through the comprehensive permit process. And this unit count does not include the units that are currently before the planning board right now, which total almost 500 as it currently stands. In fact, actually, I think if the Shaw's project has, if that application has been accepted, we could add even more onto that number. And again, I'll refer back to the fact that perhaps most importantly, it doesn't include this graph doesn't include units that have yet to be proposed. So, again, that's just a basic simple count of units. We have tried in the past to slow development to the extent that we can. We've done that through a number of policy decisions, and then also through property purchases or acquisitions. So this started, I think, between 2010 and 2012 with the acquisition of Warren Woods, which is, I think, a little over 120 acres. We spent net $3.5 million to purchase that property, and everybody knows how well it's taken care of, and you have the ability, both the residents and visitors alike have the ability to go and enjoy that property. That was at risk of being developed. In 2016, actually in 2015, I should say, the Saris apartment project on Magunko Hill, which totaled almost 400 units, was permitted. And so that large a scale of a development really caused us to look and see exactly what we valued and what we wanted to preserve here as a community. And a lot of that was open space. So we started a number of property acquisitions over the years. So first was the Nicolo property, which was next to the Ashland Town Forest at 35 acres. We spent slightly under $1 million there. That was at risk to be developed. Next, we purchased the Valentine property, which was specifically one of the main reasons we purchased that was to stop the development of 120 units of apartments being built there. And basically the purchase for $3.5 million, we acquired 7 acres of the actual property, and then the abutting family, the Hicks family, was willing and generous to put a deed restriction on their 16 acres of property that they have. So we've been able to protect 23 acres that way. In 2019, we purchased, which was a very, very big, complicated transaction, the Rail Transit District. And that included us purchasing what's known as Lot 3 of the Rail Transit District. which was 100 acres. It allowed us to save 24 acres on lot 2. And then it also carved out 15 acres for the YMCA. So we spent a little over $4 million for that. And then we also spent around $600,000 for Zero Tri-Street. That was a total of 9 acres. In 2020, we ended up taking the public safety building property, which was owned by the Fafford Corporation. They had initially offered that as a gift to us for the public safety building. And we ended up having to take it through eminent domain for no cost to the town. But that was scheduled to be developed as well. And I also mentioned that in addition to property purchases, we looked at policy decisions too. So in 2016, it presented to town meeting what's known as a rated development bylaw, which limited any project that was approved. It limited their ability to build only 25% of the units they were approved for in any given year. So that was a 4-year period. And then I had referenced earlier the fact that we recently implemented a sewer moratorium in September for our town. So that being said, as you could see through the previous graph, there was still an increase in units over the years. So one of the things we're always concerned about is, what does this increase in housing units do for our school enrollment? And so I put together this graph, which shows you over the years from 2004 onward. Again, this is based on fiscal year. The blue columns that you see are, again, the total unit count for the town, going again from a little over 6,000 to slightly under 7,500. And the orange line shows the student enrollment. And this is taken from the DOE website. Superintendent Adams and I are working at refining some of these numbers. But as you can see, it's a steady increase over the years. In 2004, we were at roughly 2,600 units. In 2022, we're at 2,870. So, or 2,900. So basically a 300 student increase in Ashland Public Schools. Another thing that we are really concerned about is, like I mentioned before, what is the impact of these developments on our water and sewer infrastructure? This was actually surprising to me when I put it together, because like many of you out there, common sense dictates that, okay, you have more units, you're probably using more water and using more sewer capacity. So again, what this graph shows, beginning from 2008 to 2021, which is the best data that we have right now, our water use has actually decreased from 1.85, an average of 1.85 million gallons per day, down to 1.63 million gallons per day. Again, not a huge increase, but a noticeable increase. And then actually, if you look at our sewer capacity or sewer usage, that has gone from, again, in 2008, 1.24 million gallons per day to 1.27 million gallons to a day. I will say that the lines for the water and sewer usage, that is a 3-year rolling average, as opposed to just a straight point by point graph or line. Just it helps smooth out a little bit of the jumps and decreases. So again, very surprised about that, and something I think that we need to look a little bit more into. And then finally, what I'm presenting here is actually information associated between the unit count and new growth. Again, I pointed out that Ashland has a history of utilizing new growth to help subsidize the budget, as opposed to looking at raising revenue through other methods. So what this shows is actually the increase in units year over year, starting in 2005, going to, again, 2023, again, based on the fiscal year, and what the corresponding new growth number is. And this was interesting to see a few patterns. Obviously, as more units come on in a given year, it increases our new growth revenue. And just like it goes down, when the unit counts go down on a year-over-year basis, we see a decrease in new growth revenue. And, so it looks apparently like we have about a 2-year delay between when units are added through the building permit process and the new growth revenue. You see in 2018, that huge amount, which is 450 units. That is a combination of the Sears development that was permitted in 2015. Again, they didn't really start pulling permits until fiscal year 18. The Lanterns at Warren Woods, which is a condo development, and also additional units at the Village of Americas. So you see a huge spike in revenue a couple years after that. So at $1.2 million. And again, through some of the policy efforts and land acquisitions that we have effectuated over the last few years, that unit count year over year has gone down, and so has our new growth revenue, which does put up a remain on our budget. So all of this stuff, we need to have a break in order to really kind of dig into not only these issues, but other issues related to our infrastructure and our programs and our community to see exactly what these impacts of new growth are. And then that gives us an opportunity to also have a conversation about what we want for our community moving forward and what kind of community we want to be. And again, that's going to go through the comprehensive plan process, which is, I should say, I mentioned the select board and planning board. It is a community process. We'll be doing a lot of public outreach. It really needs to be community driven. So that's about it for now. I just want to reinforce that I believe strongly in this warrant article. I think we need this warrant article to pass based on the information that I've presented before. And I hope that you, as the planning board, provide a positive recommendation to town meeting supporting our moratorium. I want to add one more thing that's not on this slide. So I mentioned that this applies currently to multifamily units of 3 units or more. So the select board had a discussion last night about the potential of changing that number and increasing it slightly, which would be presented as an amendment on the town meeting floor. So we can't change the article right now. That process to effectuate some kind of change would have to happen on town meeting floor through an amendment. The select board settled on changing the unit count to 12 units or more, and with a 25% affordable requirement. That is the amendment that will be presented at town meeting. If people do not agree with that amendment, if people feel like they don't have enough information at the time, it's town meeting. Residents have the ability to vote that amendment down and go back and revert to the warrant article as it currently stands. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. So if I could, just so we have some clarity procedurally as to what we as a planning board will do now and what this public hearing is about. As I understand it, in front of us is the proposed zoning article that Peter read earlier, not the amended motion. And so this specific hearing today is to get the planning board support for the proposed zoning article as Peter read. And that is what we're discussing today, and that would be presented at town meeting. Certainly, if there are public comments about the amendment, I'd like to ask for that to be, for the public to recognize that that's not what this today is about. That is more of something, if the planning board today endorses the proposed zoning article as is, then the town meeting becomes the place where the amendment can be discussed in great detail. Have I summarized that process accurately, Peter?
Very well.
Okay.
Very well done. Yes.
And so for now, we're going to focus on the proposed zoning article as is, and first hear from the planning board as far as questions from Michael and certainly comments from the planning board. And then we're going to open up to the public Again, I'm not going to stop the public comments on the amendment, but I just want to focus as much as we can on the actual zoning article as is, so that we can get to that stop first. Does the planning board have any questions for Michael on the presentation, or any comments on the zoning article as is?
I can start. I do have, you mentioned, Michael, about more information on the impacts, and I'm sure we don't have a complete list, but I mean, especially since this is a pretty well attended planning board, thank you to the public. Maybe a few ideas, but I also think it's really important. I mean, I think there's 39 people. We haven't had that since I've been on the board, attend. So I think maybe just a little preview of how we can expect the public can be involved in that as well. And I'm not trying to think that you have all the answers to that, but I think it's a perfect opportunity to kind of really show how the public can help shape this.
Sure. Well, I mean, obviously, if there are ideas that the public has of things and topics that should be looked into, they could certainly write to the planning board, myself, the select board, and we will collate those and start doing what we can to find the information related to that. And like you said, Kate, it wasn't what I presented was not a comprehensive list. I mean, we could definitely go down the road of probably coming up with scores of different things we want to measure, like ambulance calls, police calls for service, things like that. But if the public has ideas and thoughts about what you think is interesting and what you would like to see, certainly write to us and let us know.
Marcelo, Deepa, Trisha, Kevin, anything you'd like to ask Michael or add?
Yeah, I have two questions. One is relative to the presentation, because in general, I think we've heard from Jim Adams last time around, and I think there's a general consensus that this seems to be an appropriate way to go. But what I always like to make sure that there's no arbitrary decision, that the things are based on facts. So first on the presentation, Michael, so we instituted a sewer moratorium, like you explained, preceding the proposed housing moratorium. Yet in your presentation, it looks like the sewer actually is really not an issue. So was the decision based on just the preempting development and not based on the data that actually relates to sewer?
I was wondering who was going to pick that up. That's a very good question. So the reason the sewer moratorium has been established is not that we're worried about the average million gallons of a day that increasing to a number that we can't sustain or we can't handle. But what we are concerned about is how our sewage gets split up between the two pumping stations that we have. So just bear with me one moment. Just try to explain this. So, we currently have an average of 1,270,000 gallons a day that go through our sewer system. We're well below any type of bureaucratic capacity or any paper capacity that we have based on permits from DEP or an IMA with Framingham. But what this doesn't tell you is that a significant amount of that waste is going to a certain pumping station and it's starting to overload. We're concerned about it overloading its physical capacity. So for example, 1,270,000, it's great if you have a system that's set up to handle things equally and you have 600,000 going in one pumping station and 600,000 going in another. But if you have a situation where you have 1 million gallons going to one pumping station and 270,000 going to another, that becomes problematic. And so that is the main reason why the sewer moratorium has been established.
And so is this data and the corrective measures to balance that out, is that part of the study that we heard that's going to be developed or undertaken before the moratorium expires?
Yes, so our consultant Haley and Ward is starting to work on that study, that analysis. But
Okay.
it also should tie into the comprehensive plan a bit too. So
Yeah.
we're going to have Haley and Ward's report that talks about the physical capacity and, again, what I call the paper capacity. But then we also need to determine as a community what we want to do. Do we want to expand our sewer capacity? Do we want to expand our sewer capacity in certain places? Questions like that would be answered through the comprehensive planning process.
Okay, and the second part is that, again, trying to make sure that there's no arbitrary procedure here. So we have been discussing these recently these proposed change to the bylaws, and now we learned today that this board changed their mind on the number. So it seems strange that was not settled before this. So what prompted that, and with like a sudden change of mind and on a number that seemed to be kind of a baseline of what the change is proposed, the proposed change is it's all about. And so I just wonder what is the basis? That's number one. And also with the moratorium, I would like to understand if you can, or you and Peter can explain where we are now on the safe harbor data. Is the moratorium going to basically be overruled by any 40B that comes with federal mandates? So if you can address those two issues.
Great questions. So first, regarding the proposed amendment that would be made on the floor. So select board members heard from different members in our community, and their concern was that if you had a number so low as 3 or more, that would limit the potential to do comparatively smaller projects and infill development in some of our key locations like downtown and 126. So I'm not sure if 12 is going to be enough to to basically move the needle in the minds of builders and people who would redevelop some of our sites. But that is the discussion that they had, how to, basically try to address some of the issues that were raised to them. And I just want to point out, this is an amendment at town meeting. So the amendment would be proposed on the floor, and then if it receives a second, we would go to discussion on the amendment. And if people don't feel comfortable with it or don't agree with it, they can vote no against that. And
Yeah, no, I understand that, but as you said, moving from 3 units to 12, to be honest, with the cost of developing a site, I seriously doubt that moves the needle in any meaningful direction. So if we wanted some moratorium, I think seems like we want to have a moratorium, or the moratorium should be shorter. I don't know. It just seems inconsistent. But can you address the 40B concern?
yes, so both the sewer moratorium and the building moratorium, if those are implemented, we would still be susceptible to 40B developments as long as we are not in safe harbor. So as this is a bylaw, or a zoning bylaw specifically, and the sewer moratorium is a regulation, 40B allows developers to circumvent our zoning bylaws and our regulations in order to build dense projects as long as they have 25% affordable. So we would still be susceptible to 40B projects if we are not in safe harbor. Currently, we're not in safe harbor. We came out of safe harbor in August of 2022. The planning board has a couple projects before it right now that, if approved, would put us back into safe harbor for at least a 2-year period.
Okay, so I think that's important for everybody to understand. So we're putting a moratorium on projects that would be reviewed by the planning board and by the town to adjust them, and that would get us to safe harbor. We potentially, if we don't get in safe harbor now, we're not going to put a moratorium on that possibility, and then we're going to potentially get same effect of dense buildings without the review of the town. So I think people should be aware of that, at least until we are in safe harbor.
Good point.
I have no more questions. Thank you, Michael.
And just to reiterate, procedurally, the planning board tonight is just being asked to endorse the zoning bylaw as is without the amendment. Not being asked to endorse the amendment, correct? Just so that we're all on the same page. And then the other thing I wanted to clarify, it's my understanding that any developer during the moratorium can file an application, and we would not be able to prevent from hearing that application. Moratorium only prevents actual building if that application is granted. Right? So am I correct on that?
No, you're correct about that procedurally. In practice, a few communities have enacted moratoriums, and what we've seen is that builders do not go through the application process because they don't know if that moratorium is going to be extended in the future, which it can be if the community chooses to do that. As a practical example, related specifically to Ashland, several of us have heard rumblings about another potential development on 126 towards the Market Basket site, which would be upwards of 200 units and a significant amount of commercial space. Well, my understanding is once that developer heard that we were putting on a moratorium, assuming that it would pass at town meeting, they actually withdrew from the land transaction with the owner and backed out.
Experience, would that include 40B proposals as well, that developers tend to kind of hang out and wait for a moratorium to end?
I don't know if any communities have recently put on a moratorium that have had 40B developments come into their community, but I want to check because I believe all those communities are in safe harbor. So I had to check that.
Understood. Okay. Deepa, Kevin, Tricia, do you guys have any questions, comments?
I was curious, Michael, you touched on the sewer capacity. On that same chart, it shows the water usage, which I'm nice to see it down. What's the capacity there? I know where, every year I've lived here, there's a water ban, starting halfway through the summer. So is there an issue there? Or are we seeing lower usage because halfway through this chart, there started being a water ban every year? Or
yeah, I think so. Our limitations on our water service are based on physical capacity, like the ability to have enough water within our aquifer to draw from and distribute throughout the town. So that's one of our limitations in terms of water. We have recently hooked up to the MWRA, so we have a permanent connection that is allowable, that is allowed to be turned on in emergency situations. And I believe we're limited to an average of 300,000 gallons a day if we need that. What I hypothesize is happened is that as we have become more conscious, environmentally conscious and water conscious, people have started utilizing more water conservation measures, low flow toilets, things of that nature. And that's why we're seeing that decline.
I'm good for now, and I don't have any questions.
Okay. Deepa, I think you're last here.
I'm all set as well.
Okay. If there's no further questions from the planning board, I think it's appropriate to open it up to public comment and questions. So why don't we go ahead and start? I'm just looking for the hands.
I can
Yes.
step in.
Go ahead.
We have 2-3 hands up. And if anyone's interested, please raise your hand and I'll get to you. But to start off the conversation, I would like to introduce Mr. Mark Tassoni. Mr. Mark Tassoni, can you please unmute yourself and introduce yourself with your name and or address?
Hey, thank you. Good evening, Mark Tassoni, 49 Hawthorne Road. And I got a couple of questions, couple issues I want to talk about on this. One is the water itself for this moratorium. With the newer hookup that we have, and the MWRA is looking at all records and volume counts, what's that going to do with the moratorium down the road? That's one question. Let me ask the other one. I'll wait for the answer.
So let me, so Mark, you're asking what the permanent connection, how it relates to the moratorium?
Yes, to the for this moratorium for the 2-year, and then it's going to delay and then come back and be used at the regular connection for the regular usage once the moratorium's expired.
Yeah, so I mean, what you're seeing in terms of the average usage per day, I mean, if more units are added, again, you would suspect that that number would increase at least a little bit. So if we, and therefore we might get closer to a point where we would need to turn on the connection, we would reach an emergency status faster. But however, if we, are looking at pausing development for a period, we wouldn't have that issue.
Okay, and my other one would be about the sewer capacity with this moratorium, and the way in the same sort of frame of the question is the 2-year period, and when the 2-year period's over, newer developments, or can this involve with sewer now? Can this be included with mixed business residential down the road, or is this going to be just the family housing?
Mark, thank you for bringing that up. I should have mentioned that earlier. So this does not apply to only residential projects. This would apply to mixed-use projects that do have a multi-family component.
So that's like one of the reasons why 126 is being redone, and 135 has a couple of areas that could maybe spot place for the sewer and mixed use. So downtown itself, for both sewer and water and mixed use, how would that affect downtown?
Okay, I think I understand what you're saying, Mark. So if a moratorium is on, what that would mean is that, well, let me back up a little bit and just explain kind of the real estate market the way it is, and maybe explain a little bit about government's role. So right now, there is not a huge market for commercial property. With the changes in the work environment, our geographic location, we have a lot of our spaces full, but there's not a lot of demand for new spaces. So builders, if they want to build commercial space, they're doing it, they can't really count on that revenue to finance the project. So they have to have a residential component, which in turn allows them to generate the income necessary to repay a loan and for the lender to feel comfortable with lending them that money. So it's, we talk a lot about zoning, and I always say it's more economics than zoning. So what this moratorium would cause, at least for a period, and it might be a lag, is developers would probably not look at any opportunities in downtown, or actually, throughout town period, but in some of our targeted areas, you wouldn't see the revitalization of certain properties.
And my last point would be, I know this may not be fair to them, but the 10 to 50 Main Street, the Gordon property, if that was brand new and this moratorium got in the way of them, what would happen with the water and sewer in that sense? If Gordon's property was not in the progress now, if it would be waiting for the moratorium.
And Mark, that particular project is not going to be impacted by the moratorium at all, because the moratorium occurred after that application was already accepted.
I do understand that. I'm just I know it's hypothetical. Let's put it that way. I know it's hypothetical, but I want to just put out there, in the future of this moratorium period, if a theme like 1050 Gordon property comes around, would the moratorium have a impact on that or not? Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. And Peter, do you want to call the next person?
Yes, I do. The next person with their hand up to Rob Scher. Rob Scher, can you please unmute yourself and introduce yourself with your name and your address?
Thank you. Thank you for letting me speak today. Yeah, I just wanted to, or as a member of the select board, endorse Michael's remarks about the overall moratorium, for the reasons he stated. And we proposed that and approved it, and would appreciate support for that. If it's appropriate, Madam Chair, I could explain a little bit about why the select board took the action they did, if that would be helpful to people.
Tricia, I assume you're okay with that?
Yeah, that's.
I meant you, Madam Vice Chair.
Just making it. I think that's fine.
You have the chair.
That's fine. Go ahead, Rob.
We did get some information, as Michael stated, about allowing at least small projects to go forward doing this 2-year project. And we don't have, this was really a kind of compromise number that the members could live with. And there was we did have pretty substantial discussions over our last 2 meetings. So, I apologize. People are just hearing about it now and thinking it all just happened last minute. We've been discussing it probably for a month since shortly after this was proposed. And so we're really at a place where we don't have a lot of data. And I think that's one of the things we wrestled with. And we just kind of felt that the issues are being raised by these really large projects, and that we were looking for a way to allow at least small, modest projects to move forward during that period, including affordable housing projects. That's why we did add the affordable housing requirement. So, we are living with also a housing crisis, and we're aware of that. But we're all agreed that this kind of rapid growth is too much, and that's why we're proposing a moratorium. But it's really just a way to look for allowing small, modest projects to move forward during that 2-year period. And I admit that, we don't have the hard data. We don't know exactly what might happen. So I can see why people would have reservations. We just didn't have a lot of time to really get all the details that we would have liked. But this is our kind of, I would say, seat of the pants estimate that we think this would be kind of a reasonable number of small projects that would be permitted over the next few years that have that kind of, as we talked about, infill and mixed use that, is generally seen as appropriate and desirable as long as they're well designed. So that's just kind of our feeling. I can only speak for myself, but that's the kind of discussion that I was involved in and how we ended up where we were proposing this. So just wanted to say that. So thank you.
Thank you for explaining the amendment piece.
Anna, can I comment on that?
Yep, go ahead.
Rob, thank you for explaining that, because it is a little weird to hear, and I understand the challenge of trying to come up with something. But clearly, I mean, the only hard data that we got last time around was from the superintendent of schools saying that the schools are bursting almost out of capacity. So the moratorium that I asked him specifically, is that data why you support a moratorium? He said yes. So if we're going to allow certain type of projects with a number that was not based on hard data, like you mentioned, so how many? The schools are still the hard data we have is the one of the schools. So you see how there's some inconsistency there, unless, and I don't know if there's a way to round it up, but it feels a little kind of up from thin air. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's a little better in thin air, but maybe. And one of the reasons I came tonight was hoping to hear maybe a little bit. I mean, I think I could at least encapsulate my thinking that if it's a 12-unit project, we're likely not looking at hundreds of units. We're looking at more like, 50, 60 units built that way, if any. But if there's data to indicate that that's possibly wrong, or that it's going to be more of an impact on schools, I'd be quite open to not passing this. But that's kind of what we were thinking, that we're not looking at a lot here. We're not looking at straining the schools or services, but it's well, I keep saying our, but it was at least the way I think an estimate of what is likely to happen, but that could be wrong, and I could see why people would have issues with it. But
it sounds like we're going to have a very lively town meeting discussion about the amendment. I think procedurally, because tonight is really about the planning board supporting the original zoning article as is. I think we're somewhat limited in how much we can offer input on the amendment, because I don't think the planning board is in a position to vote for the amendment or to endorse it or not endorse it. But I definitely think it would be helpful, if planning board members want to share their thoughts on the amendment, we can certainly do that after the public comment is wrapped up. And Joan, I think you were next.
That is correct. Joan Gunfry is the next speaker with her hand raised. I'm going to lower your hand, but Joan, please introduce yourself.
Yes, Joan Gunfry, One Shore Road. And I just want to say that one line about the amendment, and that is that I was disheartened to see the select board vote to increase the number of units allowed. I think that I have concerns, as Marcelo just mentioned. One of the big ones was the schools, and I think that it makes not a lot of difference whether you have 50 units in 3 parcels or you have 50 units in one big building. The impacts are going to be the same, and I think that I really hope that I think the moratorium was proposed to give the town time to evaluate our resources, and which I am very concerned about, as I said. And to me, I think that I sincerely hope that the current article as written passes and that the planning board supports the original article. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. And I don't see any other public comment. Is there anyone I'm missing, Peter?
No, actually, we just have two new hands. Number one, E. San Clement. E. San Clement, please introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you. Edward San Clemente. I represent Ashland Senior Housing, doing business as the residents at Valley Farm, 369 Pond Street. I haven't had the opportunity to read through the Warren article, but I think I heard Mr. Herbert say that the unit calculations in his presentation did also include age restricted over 55 and units of that nature. And my comment is really around the fact that being in the senior housing business in the 76 units that we have there at Valley Farm, we don't have impact on the school system at all. So I'm just curious if that was a factor in when you bifurcate, maybe making an amendment, you could say sort of those age restricted kind of units might be those types of projects that you could still encourage. That's not to say, nothing here implies that the residents of Valley Farm is thinking of building an addition, but if we were, we'd be kind of caught in the sort of what's happening here. If we wanted to build another 6 units, we wouldn't be able to move forward on that based on what this moratorium seems to be looking to do. So it's just a comment on that, and I thank you for your time.
And Michael, I'm guessing it's very difficult to have a moratorium that allows for a specific group, like age-related housing or family-related housing, without essentially discriminating against other types of housing.
So go ahead. Sorry.
Are there communities that have moratoriums that allow a certain type of group-related, kind of targeting a group type of moratorium? It seems like that could get us into some trouble.
Yeah, I mean, the first point I want to make is Edward, thank you for your concern. I'm almost positive, I need to go back, but I believe assisted living units are considered commercial as opposed to residential. Again, I would want to take a look at that further, but in that sense, the residents at Valley Farms would be exempted from it. This moratorium wouldn't apply to them. And Anna, to your broader point, yes, it's really hard to target specific types of developments in order to really kind of tailor this to a certain extent. When we talk about age-restricted housing, we're talking about either rental or condo units that are either 55 plus or 62 and over. And so those are clearly residential.
So it sounds like this might be an exemption that's not part of the moratorium. Mr. St. Clement, does that answer your question? You kind of just.
It does. Thank you very much.
And I think there was one more hand.
I think it was John.
Yep.
Excuse me, I muted myself.
Yeah, you caught that?
I did.
Oh, I thought you had your hand up.
There's 2 hands that came out that were up and then came down.
Paul, you got to go first. She's trying to get me to go first.
It was Mr. John Dudley and Miss Paul Parker. Either or, please step forward.
Where'd she go? Yeah, I'll go first if you want me to.
Sure.
How you doing? If you're looking for assisted living, that's residential, just so you're aware. You can find that. So that's also going to get picked up in the moratorium. So let me just start by just trying to stay. I'm paying attention to this. I got a life to live, like a lot of us do. So this is one of those things that kind of slides by quickly, and I think there's plenty of people in town that could help with this, that make a living, around things like this and in this. So I'm looking around. I don't know if there's any other developers on the call that either do this for a living or it's part of their business. And that's usually one of the problems when a town approaches things like this. And thank God we have people that are putting in the time, and we have professionals hired to do this, but they're relying on us to direct them and to set policy and set attention. So I'll kick it off by saying, hearing this, seeing this come up, it somewhat breaks my heart, because I'm looking at a lot of the planning we did over the years. I was in the planning board for 5+ years. I do intend to serve again at some point. I'm knee deep in running a family, running a couple of businesses, but I also will continue to do that the rest of my life. And I've got a heart for Ashland, live in Ashland, have business in Ashland, go to church in Ashland, and I know several of you on the call. But I was trying to decide whether to speak up here, let it just kind of blow over like a lot of things do over the years. But I just want to point out we've done a ton of planning on this over the years. I was on one of the comp plan committees. It was interesting. I was searching for that to see whether it even got adopted, but we did put a lot out there in 2016. We had that comp plan 2003, which is listed. We had an 88, one in 72. We had a 2010 downtown Ashland revitalization and redevelopment plan, which I was just kind of reviewing again. This is an excellent plan to how we're going to revitalize our downtown. And the hardest part, like the path you think we're going down, is not probably, you're not going to get what you think you're going to get. We came out of the last plan we did with what we wanted. And a lot of times that influenced zoning. We even went to form-based code, the way we wanted buildings to look. And what I think what got the reaction we're getting from a lot of people right now is all of a sudden we hit a market where interest rates were low enough, demand was enough, and it just came at us very quickly. But this is what we planned. I mean, nobody on this call can say that we didn't see Cirrus Apartments coming. I mean, Gaynor had that. We rezoned that property years ago, decades ago. We met with him multiple times trying to convince him to come do this project, and he tried to convince other people to come do it. And some of it just, the problem is it came to fruition quickly. But you can't forget that was tied, that was our plan. You know, people before me, it was their plan. It's scary when it comes in quick like this, but you have to just look at it for what it is. If everything got filled up the way we wanted, it would probably scare the heck out of us.
And John, I don't want to cut you off because it sounds like you have a lot of passion and a lot to say, and I'd love to have you be part of the comprehensive plan and further discussions, but I want to focus you in on this bylaw specifically, if you can. Can you tell us what your concern is on that? I think all of us would love to hear more from you about planning, but I want to make sure we get to the bylaw if we can.
Sure. I think we're overreacting. I think Marcelo wisely picked up that the moratorium does not and will not stop large-scale apartments. Everything's about to come in one way or another. This will not stop it. The only thing this is going to do is crush downtown infill redevelopment. Even like a police and fire station, when they move out of that set of buildings, you will not find somebody to come in and redevelop that unless there's incentives to do so. You will be sitting on relic properties downtown for several years, like we did for decades, trying to get people to move in. A thriving downtown requires a clear path and incentives for owners and developers to come in. I think that number needs to be somewhere between 20 and 25. I realize people feel burned by what you saw on 128. It felt different than when a couple of other properties down there, but I think it was the developer. It was not what was done there, it was how it was done. You're going to see the same thing happen next to Town Hall. I think as a whole, I don't even know what to tell you, whether you do a moratorium or not. I think I think you're wasting your time doing it, but I do think you should do another comprehensive plan. But when it comes back to this, personally, I think we should drop this off zero. But if you think we have to do it, don't have properties sit there dead and inactive for another decade. Like, raise that number. So that's my comment.
Thank you, John. Any other public comments, Peter, that we missed? Or hands?
There are no public comments at this current time.
Okay, so I think at this point the planning board has to, I assume, actually vote on the proposed zoning article as is. Is that correct, Peter?
That is correct. We are in a time frame regarding town meeting that it's appropriate for the planning board to take action and discuss and to vote to either support and or to not support it.
Does anyone want to start the discussion before we make a motion? I'll jump in if no one else wants to start. Trisha, do you want to start? Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of good points, made in both directions. I think Ashland, from what I've seen on the planning board, the size of the project doesn't seem to make a difference. It makes a difference, obviously, about the number of school children, the amount of water that's used, but it doesn't make a difference about how much that project influences the community around it, influences the neighborhood around it. And so buildings with a very small number of units have a huge impact on the community as well. And they have been coming at us kind of fast and furious. And at the same time they're coming at us, we keep being asked to have a more comprehensive guide to kind of look again about what is important to the town. I know that a lot of the previous documentation talks about multifamily housing. It talks about extra density. There's multifamily housing, mentioned in the Cecil report, which is about 126. It's mentioned in other areas. But when it actually comes down to adding housing in that density, you get a much different reaction from the residents. And so sometimes I'm just not sure that the documents we have currently guiding our process truly reflect what the residents are looking for. And I'm not sure where that difference came in. And I think that's what kind of started to kind of push us toward a comprehensive plan process. That the process that was started before was not completed. And so we don't have that kind of guidebook. And it seems like there's a lot of conflict maybe in the town in trying to get to something we all agree on. And so putting the brake on things kind of feels like a time to figure that out. I agree that there could be some, adverse effects to that it's not necessarily all, a perfect solution, but I'm not sure what would be.
Thank you, Tricia. Deepa, Marcelo, I think it looks like Marcelo unmuted himself. You want to go next, Marcelo?
I would just add to what Tricia said. I agree with how she presented it, and I just want to reiterate the only hard data that we have, as far as I can tell, is what we heard from the superintendent of schools. He presented an alarming situation, which makes me think that okay, that this is something that the town needs. Other than that, I am agnostic about the process, and seems like an overreaction. I kind of agree with John, I believe, that just spoke. That seems that we're going to try to put a moratorium, kind of because there's a lot of alerting or people complaining about things happening. But it comes down to what Tricia just said. We have documents that have been planned for decades, asking for developments like this. And now when they happen, everybody's jumping, saying, no, don't do that. But it's in the bylaws, so we cannot say no. I mean, we're not, dictators to say yes or no. We're just following the bylaws. So it concerns me that we're going to vote on something. And in principle, I guess I support it because the data that the superintendent presented. Besides that, I don't see anything else other than concerns, but the waters are not in critical conditions, but I totally understand what Michael presented, that the pumping stations need to be addressed. So, okay, I get it. Doesn't seem to be an emergency, but there's something of concern. Now, there's plenty of water as far as we can tell. There's some secondary effects, like in downtown or other areas where it worries me that Ashland would remain with some patchwork of property that are derelict or abandoned, and that doesn't help any town. So I guess in my personal opinion, I would vote to pass this for the people to vote at town meeting. Now this is an open meeting, so I'm glad that everybody is getting to hear that. But I'm a little anxious about the backup for it. That's all I'm going to say.
Thank you, Marcelo. Kate, Deepa, Kevin, anything you want to add to the discussion before?
I would say that definitely after hearing everybody, I am not convinced that this was the way to go myself. There are a lot of things in addition to all the kind of the growing housing needs. It's also the fact that last 3 years was a chapter that none of us have really seen in so many decades. And I think having everybody to stay home and kind of seeing a very different way of life, these numbers could have gone in any way if we all had a normal life 3 years back. I think it seems like data is not that accurate or clear enough, at least from when I'm hearing everybody. And I feel like I kind of seem to agree with what John was just saying. It really doesn't help us kind of try to solve something which we feel like we are, but maybe we are not. So I feel like I'm not convinced myself. So again, going back, the only data that we had, substantial data we had, was from the school presentation, but otherwise feels like we are making this at the wrong we're making a call at the wrong time, possibly.
Thank you, Deepa. Kate?
I think I would be ready to vote, and I think that this should be brought to town meeting. I would absolutely support bringing this to town meeting for vote and discussion by the public.
Kevin?
I think I kind of agree with Trisha's point of view on this. The feeling I get from town, and maybe I'm only hearing the loudest people in town. Those who speak loudest are the ones who are heard. People seem to not totally be on board with these plans that were made in the past, and we're going to now undertake this new comprehensive plan, which hopefully the timeline would align with this moratorium. So I think it's a good opportunity to get a handle on everything and, come out of the moratorium with possibly revised zoning to continue to build out the town, but to do it appropriately and with the public's proper input, which the comprehensive plan is seeking.
Thank you. And I'll just say that I think that John Dudley's comments speak to me, as well as I actually see it both ways. I see the concern, why are we going to go out of business essentially as a community? Or are we going to dissuade the kind of development that we need? But I also see that there's concern in the community that is data driven, not just the school data, but the aquifers are running low. We do need that connection to the emergency water. Just because our water use is the same or slightly lower doesn't mean we're not running out of water. And the sewer capacity is an issue. We need to figure out where we want to build as a community, not just how we want to build, but literally location and capacity. And we need to do some serious planning as a community. And I appreciate John's point that, guys, we got here. This is exactly what we wanted. But the community has changed, John, over the last 10 years. And the superintendent's presentation was really powerful in how we have changed as a community. We're completely a different community than we were certainly 10 years ago, 5 years ago even. And the values of the community need to be reflected in the planning. So I think actions, to me, speak louder than words. The moratorium will mean absolutely nothing if we don't spend the next 2 years planning with people like John Dudley involved, people who understand the history of this and how we got here. So that we have diverse critical voices from all sides to make sure that we plan for the entire community. So I'm very much in support of the moratorium as is, to give our community a pause, but with action. We actually have to do something. We can't just stop. And unless there's some other comment from the board, I can make the motion. Does anybody else want to say anything before we do that?
I see Michael's hand up.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask really more of a procedural question. So my understanding is that the vote the planning board needs to take is whether to recommend or to not recommend the warrant article. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Michael,
Yeah. No.
whether the planning board recommends it or does not recommend it, it still goes forward to town meeting. Is that right?
Correct.
So what's necessary is because we're within a time window of town meeting, the planning board has to make the planning board has to have a report at town meeting that can be done either with verbally, but the planning board does have to stand up at town meeting and discuss the public hearing process. And that obviously occurred tonight as a report per se.
So it's a motion to endorse the zoning article is what we're making. Okay. So I'll make a motion to endorse the proposed zoning article that has been published as Article 7 on the special town meeting warrant to be held next Wednesday, November 16th at town meeting.
Second.
And a roll call vote.
Deepa Venkatai.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcelo Hona, aye.
Catherine Jerzyk, aye.
Trisha Kendall, aye.
And I think the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Yes, the motion passes unanimously, and I will work to write up a summary that can be reported at town meeting from a representative of the planning board. So with that, that closes out the public hearing for the proposed zoning amendment. Thank you, everybody.
And I'm going to step out because I believe the next one is 501 Pond.
Before you do, Anna, we thought if Bill, I see Bill Novakowski here, we thought instead of making him wait through 501, we would review his reapplication for the design review committee.
Okay.
So how you do? Peter or Anna, do you want to continue to? Sure.
That one for me. Thank you.
So taking things out of order, I would like to or introduce Bill Novakowski. Bill Novakowski has served as a member of our design review committee here in Ashland, and Bill's term is up for reappointment from the planning board. And so Bill graciously joins us on this call. And then also Bill has submitted and provided the planning board a quick resume, which was circulated out to the planning board members by email this past Monday. And so all planning board members, I would like to introduce you to Bill Novakowski. And Bill, obviously, I would just like to open up the conversation between the planning board and yourself concerning your interest in serving another term on the design review committee. So, Bill, do you want to tell the planning board a little bit about yourself and your interests in serving on this committee?
Sure. Thank you. And thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Obviously, Ashland seems to be at something of a crossroad, and this, to me, is an extraordinarily important time for everybody involved, and I would like to be involved. We've talked earlier, particularly Marcelo said something to the effect that we need to develop a vision for the town. I have my own ideas, as everyone does, and I think I can contribute. I really think I take issue, I guess, with what I term big box apartment buildings coming into town. I really don't think that aesthetically they add a whole lot. I think if they were scaled down, perhaps by at least a story or two, it would at least not be quite as imposing. But that being said, we've worked long and hard to bring, should we say, more greenery, more open space, more aesthetically pleasing aspects to any project in town. I mean, if anybody has questions for me, I'd be glad to answer them. But I would really appreciate being part of the planning process and the going forward of what we want Ashland to look like.
And Bill, if I could, I'm not as familiar with you. How long have you been on design review already?
I've been 2 years.
And do you have interest in doing both design review and being involved in the comprehensive plan as well?
Yes.
I don't have any questions other than that. Does anyone else on the board have any questions for Bill?
No, more of a comment, maybe a question. I welcome Bill's passion and willingness to serve, and I would like to ask you what is your thought? I mean, of course, you've been 2 years on that committee, and we are trying, both the planning board and the design review committee, to establish a better process to really make the process that you described more efficient. I think it's a very opportune time for getting people like you on this committee. So I very much endorse your application. And but if you can comment on what do you see moving forward, the key challenges on getting the process between our committees improved to make projects better?
I think one of the things that I think would be really beneficial is physical walkthroughs of sites. You can find out, I wouldn't say find out, but I think by walking things, getting an idea of the scale, I think it would help everybody to realize what is coming in. You know, it's like in the case of, say, 12 Pond Street, you have what in essence is a 4-story building in a postage stamp type of lot. It's helpful to see in a situation like that, or at least imagine that, you know, people on the street won't see the sun until noon with a building like that on site. And I think it gives an idea of the aesthetic and the effect that a property like that is going to have on a neighborhood. I think more, I guess, collegial meetings. I really appreciated the meetings that we did have together to discuss things. They don't have to be totally formal. But I mean, everybody's got an idea of what we want Ashland to look like. And it also helps to develop, you know, collegiality, if you will. I mean, you're a face on a screen right now. I mean, I would love to meet in person. And I really think it would help ease the process. It would create trust. It would create camaraderie, if you will. And in that fashion, it helps one to be able to hear the other person's view.
I think these are excellent points. I can tell you, I reached out to Tricia and I have chatted about the possibility next year of being more in person, because there is kind of magic that happens when you're connected together in one space. And hey, we're the planning board. It's all about space. So we need to be in space together, right? Whether it's design space, like you mentioned, or the work that we do, which is very hands-on. But I think we're starting, Bill, to move in the right direction. We had a meeting with the Main Street project earlier. Was it this week? I feel like these weeks are melding together.
It was Monday, wasn't it?
Yeah. Where we sat down and, you know, had the plans in front of us. And it was, I thought, a very important thing to kind of be together in the same space. Right. So I hear you. I think there's value to human interaction. I certainly have fatigue from staring at the little squares. All right. Any other questions for Bill? Okay. So I will make a motion to reappoint to the Design Review Committee member Bill Novakovsky.
I'll second.
And a roll call vote.
Tipankit, aye.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcelo Hona, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
And Tricia Kendall, aye.
That passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
And I will stay for the 501 session.
And I'm going to leave.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Peter will buzz me in when it's time. All right.
Thanks for helping us.
Awesome. I will text you, Anna. Bill, congratulations and welcome to another 2-year term with the Design Review Committee. Next on our agenda, I do want to, before we take formal votes on the continuance items, I would like to reopen the public hearing for 501 Pond Street. This project has been ongoing, as everyone knows, from the planning board side of things. But Ben and Matt Trask, I believe they're on the call. Just as an update from the planning board, we have tried to tie down all loose ends that the planning board has identified. I believe with that, we did have confirmation from the fire department that the attorney and radiuses have been secured and we have moved forward. With that said, at the last meeting, we did have kind of outline some of the findings in our application and for this project. And I have moved forward and expanded those within a draft decision that I'm happy to share with everybody. I apologize for the delay in sending it out to the planning board. However, as everyone knows, everything in the office is very, it's happening very quickly due to the moratorium, the proposed moratorium. But with that said, I'm going to give the opportunity to Matt and Ben Stevens, representing the Trask Corporation, to give the planning board an update, if they would like, on where things have come from the last meeting. So Ben and Matt, please take the microphone and you can give us an update on where things are in your perspective.
Thank you, Peter. I think there was a couple of small items from the last meeting. We did hear back from the third-party consultant, I think late last week, and there was a typo and a sort of one stormwater management point that we had to address, which we then responded to. So my assumption is that we'll be sort of 100% complete on the third-party reviews consultant for stormwater, so on and so forth. We do have our stormwater permit and our notice of intent order of conditions from the Conservation Commission. As you mentioned, the fire department did do a final review of the plan. As I remember it, there was one question, a roof line question that we needed to tie up, and if you'd like, we do have that plan. Matt, if you could share Matt's screen. I think the chair brought it up at the last meeting. So we do have that, if we could share that.
Yes, I have made Matt a co-host, and obviously Matt is now sharing his screen. So, and so Matt and I know Trisha had sent the email, which was forwarded. So Matt, please walk us through these elements, please.
So essentially, this was back in July, and we were sort of near the very end of the discussions on the architecture, and there was one final comment that had to do with that fourth floor front elevation, if I recall, and please correct me, board members, if I don't have this correct, but it involved how the roof lines tied back on that hip in the middle, and there seemed to be a desire and agreement from our architect, Matt Murata, to have the fourth floor appear more as a full dormer. So I think this adjustment he did shows it more as a dormered application. So you don't have the hip, and he's showing a little roof line at that third level, if you will, to sort of pop out that fourth level as a dormered look. But that was about it.
Yeah, I think it was my original comment, maybe the final comment on that when we discussed it in terms of design, and it was just that where it says previous dormer detail, the drawing at the top, where it just looked somehow just still wasn't looking right, looked kind of soft, and so I wasn't sure. Matt said he had an idea. I didn't know, where he was going with it, but. And so this isn't, I didn't really have an expectation of what he wanted, but I do see that he was trying to, that fourth floor there now relates more to, say, the dormer on the left hand of the screen, popping out of the gable. So it has a better relationship to that. And I think the getting rid of the hip, I think somehow makes it more crisp. I think the hip was just maybe too soft or something in a way. It didn't really read as a dormer with that hip on it. So I think those are good change. Especially the hip is a good change to me. And I think the roof line works as well. It'd be helpful to have other opinions on that. It's a subtle change, really, because it sits back a ways.
It's subtle, Tricia, but I agree with you. It's more effective this way.
It kind of just breaks things down a little bit more, adds a little bit more detail, maybe. Bill, you're welcome to weigh in if you would like as part of the design review committee.
I agree with the continuous dormer, and I apologize for sounding like a broken record, but looking at this view, it looks like a 3-story building, and I find that scale much more palatable than the 4-story that is actually going in there. I mean, it looks like New England vernacular. It doesn't look like a high-rise. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to weigh in on that? Okay. So in general, I guess we like the revision. That's obviously just a small design revision. So we'll, unless I hear otherwise, we'll say to go with that revision. So thank you for following up on that.
Thank you. I think that's there were no other substantial. There's some fill-ins that we're working on with Peter. More dotting I's and crossing T's, if you will, and we're working with him now on getting him some background stuff wherever needed. But for the most part, we're near the end as far as we see it.
I would say, well, if you're finished, I would just ask for if there's members of the planning board received all the materials this week. If there's anything that jumps out at you where you would like to begin, a question, something that you wanted to review. Otherwise, I would suggest that we start going through the facts and findings that Peter filled in for us. I think we need to start there instead of draft decision, because we haven't had a chance to read that on our own.
I do have a question.
Please.
And this may be what was referred to, but there was GCG. It says this was dated November 2nd. The main outstanding item is the proposed drainage chamber system not meeting nutrient. It goes on and on. It says the applicant has requested a waiver. Without the waiver, the subsurface chambers needs to be enlarged to capture the 1-inch impervious volume.
Just to make note of that, and I'll let Ben and Matt take a just update the board. But I did receive additional documents from Ben and Matt, and those were sent directly. I believe Ben Stevens, the applicant, did send a follow-up to our third-party engineer, GCG, Mike Carter. I've put 2 phone calls in, and I've today and also yesterday to try to see if he's been able to kind of put his eyes on that. But that is one of the loose ends that is being kind of followed up on at this point.
Just for the record, we agree. I think he was misreading or misinterpreting something we were saying. So we're on the same page as far as the request he's looking for. So it's just a matter of my engineer and Mike Carter sort of getting on the same page, but there's no conflict, if you will, on concepts.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I highlighted that as well, because it doesn't sound like something, it sounds like there's something that the planning board would either want the third party engineer to figure out or Concom, as it's such things I assume are out of our area of expertise. So Kate, thanks for bringing that. That was also on my list. Anything else from the board? Questions that jumped out at you that you want to make sure we talk about specifically?
I just want to bring up one point, and I know and it's something that was requested, and I made a request to the applicant, is to put together a lead checklist. And I think that was something that came out from the 100 Chestnut Street development process. And so I reached out to Ben and Matt, and hopefully that will be submitted. And then the second item I just want to make note of is for the 100 Chestnut Street project, we had the solar on the rooftop, and that was going to be installed 2 years after occupancy permits. That's kind of wanted to bring that applicant into a conversation to the forefront and just to kind of ask. And I don't know if we've actually talked about it per se, but Ben and Matt Stevens, do you have any insight on your thoughts about putting solar on the buildings? Not to put you on the spot, but I think it's just something that the planning board would like to follow up with in relationship to the decision.
We've actually looked into a little bit because, as you may or may not know, the building code's changing as of January 1. First, let me go back a little bit. Because we're a special permit, we're already, your zoning requires us to be Energy Star. So we never did the LEED certified because we have to commit to being Energy Star rated. So we're happy to fill out the LEED certification form. First I heard about it was today, Peter. So we'll have that done.
Yeah, no rush. I just wanted to put on the topic.
Right. But in researching this a little bit, building permits next year with the new rating, luckily we're all, if you didn't make the buildings fully electric, the energy code just did for you January 1st. So we're committed to solar panels on the roof within a 2-year period. That sounds, I know that what you discussed with Roy, and we're comfortable with that approach.
Great. Yeah, and the just to the LEED checklist, it came up with the other project that we've been reviewing, and it really wasn't about getting LEED certification. We know that's an expensive process, but I guess for us, for these projects and for future projects, is a way to kind of keep track, kind of compare apples to apples, and to kind of know where this project kind of sits in that spectrum. So,
and I think the objective was just to verify certifiability, not certification, just on the basic certifiable score, if you will.
Yes.
I actually think the mixed use overlay district, which is what this is under, does require LEED. I do not believe the same thing that requires the actual certificate, but we should probably just check that out. And it sounds like we're getting it either way, but include that in the findings.
I will do that.
Do you know where that is, Kate?
I could find it.
Yeah. Yeah, no pressure. If you have it, I have my code book next to me, so I could look it up. I had one other question. I might have more other questions. When I was looking through the material that you sent, and you had the letter from the Metro West Transit Authority, and then the diagram of the sign, is the location for the bus stop, the Metro West bus stop, the same as the drop off and delivery parking space? And are they okay with that?
Matt, can I ask you, you had more direct conversations with that person?
Yes. Yeah. So we had presented to, I believe her name is Emily, that we had this spot in our WUNERV that we were using as a drop-off delivery, sort of no idling, but sort of for the in and out, the mail delivery, the Amazons, that sort of thing. And that met their criteria for a pickup spot along this route, given that it's a flag down route, not an individual sort of set MWRTA owned stop route. So they were aware that they just require that we have either an individual sign or an approved bench with their wording on it at that location to sort of mark that is a stop, in addition to what it's going to be for us on our property as well.
What is a flag down spot? Can you?
Yeah, it means so basically anywhere on that route, that from Milford all the way to Framingham, if you are on that route, you can just put your hand up as the bus goes by, and they will stop and pick you up.
So you don't need to be at the bus stop? You could be between Shaw's and 501?
Correct. Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. So it's more of a, they see it as more of a quick stop than this full regular stop.
Correct.
And so thus would be willing to kind of share this. I mean, I think it makes sense that these parking spaces are shared instead of a lot of this concrete being just empty most of the day. But as long as they're good with that, then that makes sense to me. All right. Any other of those type questions, things that came out of the material today or the material this week?
I was just curious about that 11 feet overhang that it asked for. I thought we were just converting two of the Wooner parking spots to this accommodate the 9x40, but it talks about an 11 feet overhang and a bench for seating. Bench for seating is an element in that landscape, but I'm curious about that 11 feet overhang and what it really means.
Yeah. So in my discussions with Emily, I had mentioned that we have an awning over the entrance to the building that sort of would offer shade from sun and rain, that sort of thing, the elements. And I think when she was looking at the plans, maybe didn't have a clear understanding that the awning itself was not going to go over the Wooner if it was just on the building. And she was concerned that the awning might hit the bus, even though it was just attached to the building. So she made note that the awning itself is at 11 feet, where the sort of between the two floors on the building. And the awning is just that small little awning covering the door, the main entrance into the residential portion of the building, not a.
So the concern is here that the bus has a clearance of 11 feet.
Correct. Yes.
Not that people have 11 feet to wait in to protection from the rain or something like that.
Correct. Yeah. Their buses on this route, I think, are like 10.5 feet tall.
Okay.
The concern was that the bus had clearance from the awning. The awning is set back 15 feet from where the bus would park, but she just, I think, wanted to make specific note of that.
Okay. But thanks for bringing that up, Deepa. I was confused.
Because that language does not read that way. It talks about providing an overhang of 11 feet. So as long as somebody is clear of that, you're not going to have 11-foot overhang from the face of the building or anything like that, because that's not how this is reading. So, what you are talking about is 11 feet from floor level clearance, so that you clear that. But as long as we are clear that that is what that letter says, because that's not how it's reading.
Yes, that's a vertical clearance of 11 feet.
Yeah.
Not. Okay. Yeah, an overhang of 11, which I thought was very specific too, versus 10, versus 12. It needed to be 11. So that makes sense.
Thank you.
Do you think that needs to be, are we comfortable with this letter the way it is, or do we want those things clarified, or can we just put that in the conditions?
I mean, I would think the trust team would be concerned, right? Because like if it comes to a point where like, hey, we put it in paper and that's not what's been followed. So I feel like just to make sure we protect them, I think it should be clarified somewhere.
Can we have that clarified, that both the 11 feet and that the space is shared by other vehicles, by other delivery vehicles?
We can follow up on that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the explanation makes total sense, but the letter was unclear. All right. Anything else? Points jumping out?
My only question, I guess I may be forgetting what we decided. So we concluded that the parking spots for 501 would be 9x18 and not 9x19 or 9x20. Is that where we landed?
We landed on 9x18. We had voted on it at that time. I think they're providing 18, 24, 18. I believe GCG had suggested 20, 22, 20. So the distance we have, or the distance 501 has, is 2 feet different than that, 2 feet shorter than that.
Okay.
But
so we did kind of land with 9x18s.
We did at one meeting.
Yeah, I think we did that a lot. It came at a meeting this past summer.
Thank you.
You'll be amused to know, I shared this with Peter, that I now keep a tape measure in my car, and once in a while I bop out and measure parking spaces when I go to various locations. I have found them to be extremely different in different places. So I will let you know my conclusion when I end my study.
It's also the location you look at. When you look at Boston, it's different than when you look at Dedham or some of the suburbs, which is totally different.
Totally different. Yeah, agreed.
So Trish, I have it's section 9.1A7, and the last sentence of 7 says consideration shall be given to using sustainable building practices such as the LEED rating system. So I agree that it's not requiring, but I think it just probably fits in with how we should write the decision.
I'm sorry, it was 9. What was it? 9.3.
I just closed it, but I think it's 9.1A7.
Oh, okay.
Matt, Stephen just shared it with us on the screen.
Yeah, great. I see it. Yeah. So they are following Energy Star certified, which is required, and then consideration shall be given. So I think that that checklist just kind of fits into that, kind of let us know where it falls. So
it's just the practices.
At this time, would you like me to share the findings?
Yes, and if anyone has further questions, just please jump in on them.
These are the facts and the findings. Location use.
Can you make that slightly bigger? I'm old.
Hey, I could take care.
I hear you, Kate.
Kate, all of us are having a second screen going on here.
Everyone but me. No, this is really good. Is that better?
Perfect.
Okay, awesome. Location and use. This really has not changed that much since the last meeting. If I move too fast, please let me know. This obviously outlines the current project. B outlines the affordability, which would be 25% for the affordable, would be affordable. For the density requirement here. Number 3, the planning board finds the total tree plantings exceed the minimum requirement outlined. Raise the requirement for tree location and outline. Number 4 is concerning snow storage.
When we go back to the trees, that just basically refers to the fact that there are some parts of the parking that aren't divided into the smaller pods. Some parts of the parking, most of the parking is, but I think the one parking on the left-hand side of the building, Is that what that's referring to?
There's if I can interject, there's a reference to trees need to be one tree for every X number of parking spaces, no more than X number of feet away. Well, you're correct. That line has trees at either end, but not trees in front of the parking because it was tighter there. So technically, although we have plenty of trees per the number of parking spaces, they're not all within X number of feet because of that one section of parking.
Yeah, because I think there's part of that, and I wasn't sure if it applied, about having trees in the middle, and you do that on the right-hand side of the site, and I think along the back too. But I wasn't sure if it applied because this is the Pond Street Overlay District and not the commercial highway zoning. So, so that part of it anyway. But anyway, it seemed with the number of trees exceeding the amount required by code, I was okay with that. I also know that such things make plowing and things more difficult. So.
There's two elements in here, but that's exactly what that is referring to.
So that's about the all the trees.
The interior landscaping and parking area.
Is the interior landscaping needed though in the overlay district versus the commercial highway?
It's if I could, there's this 5.4 is the parking. There is no specific in the overlay. This is the parking section, if you will, and it's not. I think you're referring to you can't have more than X number of spaces without a tree, sort of breaking the pod. This is more a distance requirement, so that even if you had a run of parking, there would be trees in front of the car.
Right.
It's that one spot. We can't have trees in front of the car. There isn't as many trees near those particular spaces. But it's in the 5.4 section, which is parking.
Okay.
And I believe that's number 3 while I'm looking at it. It says landscape islands and buffers shall be a minimum area of 150 square feet and a minimum area of 8 feet, and shall contain at least one tree per 100 square feet.
But I think that's only valid in like commercial highway, which this actually kind of isn't because it's overlay district. Isn't that right? But the other things still apply. That was my reading of it, but I just wanted to be so that we're clear about what we're waiving.
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay with the waiver. I appreciate the other landscaping on the project. Right. If no one else has any questions on that, we can move forward.
Number 4 concerns out on-site snow storage. And number 5 goes into the stormwater management system. Please note this is NOAA Atlas 14. This is the newest and current precipitation data. The Conservation Commission have just updated their rules and regulations. And then updated that all projects will have to reflect NOAA Atlas 14 rainfall standards. And so with that said, Trust Development went ahead and used NOAA Atlas 14 in their calculations.
So, but this waiver is the thing that is that you mentioned that is being resolved, and that there shouldn't, I think from what you said, that a waiver shouldn't be required. Is that right?
Correct. And this is not a part of your. This is the because we have a subsurface discharge system. It's challenging to handle these particular. I don't have it in front of me, but the the two chemicals can pretty much only be uptaken by a open air detention basin. So this is not part of your stormwater regulation. It's not part of your conservation permit. It's in your zoning regulations as sort of more of a goal than anything else, because if you have a recharge system, it's very challenging to remove these chemicals because you don't have the open air, you don't have the nitrogen withdrawal, so on and so forth. So there's a sort of a swap out, then you have to handle the first 1 inch storm, which we do. And Mike Cotter said that. So we're, I think, showing him that we don't, he may still suggest that a waiver be granted for this particular condition, but he most likely will comment that we are fully discharging the first 1 inch storm. So it's sort of a trade-off anyhow.
Okay.
So I can't say for sure you won't need a waiver, but it's not a waiver from anything to do with your stormwater permit. It's something in your zoning.
Do I remember correctly that the third-party reviewer alluded to these item and suggested that there were a couple of solutions, either increase the size of the system by some percentage or change some inverts? Did I remember that right?
Yes. The invert is a separate question. That's just a typo. He wanted to make sure that the system was, you could trade off, if you will, if the system could handle the 1 inch storm, which we knew it did. So we were just trying to show him that it did do that. So we're assuming this issue will go away.
So, but he hasn't officially accepted your rationale?
We haven't heard back from him. So we don't know if he's seen the fact that we have handled the 1 inch storm.
So Peter, I would suggest that I guess once we get a response from them on this, that they clarify this language here.
Yeah, if you can highlight that sentence, Peter, so that we know it's kind of unresolved.
And this is the item that I was trying to follow up with today.
Okay.
Parking is outlined here.
So the parking is completely, there is no waiver being requested for the amount of spaces. You're providing all of the spaces that are required per bylaw.
Mm-hmm.
And but I think okay.
Didn't we mention that there's a waiver on the size though?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
I don't think it's a good practice to have a decision without like noting that.
I thought it was noted somewhere.
Yeah, because the bylaws require 20 feet and we all have agreed that actually we have to change that bylaw because we're just paving too much unnecessarily. I don't know how we're going to do that, but that's why this waiver comes into play.
Yeah, I agree that it should be. I feel like I read it later on, but it should be there as well.
I will make a note of that to add down.
Right. The next was about the waiver for the formal loading area, instead using the loading out in front and then the building management managing the move in and move out process.
Any proposed changes to section B?
Nope, I'm okay.
Is that where the 11 feet overhang kind of starts to come in and the board?
I think it is, right? I think you should put 11-foot vertical clearance.
Vertical, yeah.
Yeah, it's not the overhang.
To accommodate that MWRTA buses.
And their bench seating as well.
Bench seating.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that will work out if you have loading and unloading areas, but that's part of that letter.
You could just note it, Peter, as and other requirements as noted in that letter.
Okay, I'll fix it up in after. 1 minute. I'm gonna let Andy Hoffman. Sustainability. This is the energy star criteria.
I think once we have the checklist, we can add a note about its, where it falls on that spectrum.
Next element is concerning EV charging station. And that is confirmed with the applicant. There are 9 stations.
I thought that number was higher on their, let me give them credit for what they're on the lead sheet. Yeah.
I'll have to check it.
On the 501, this is the sustainable design strategy sheet. It says 40%, 72 of 180 spaces are EV ready. Doesn't say how many are active, but it said 72 of 180.
Right before that, Peter, if you can correct that typo and to an. Yep.
Thank you. Number C, planting. Number D, bike racks in the Wooner. Number E, residential units, electric heat pumps and electric cooktops.
And if you can just add after the cooktops, and again, this is just from the sustainability list. No gas is being used in the building.
No gas is being used in the residential units. We wanted to have gas for the commercial.
Oh, Okay, I'm reading off your list, unless it wasn't made by you. So I guess this is similar to the verbiage we had and the discussion we had about 100 Chestnut Street.
Mhm. I can add that. I can add that in.
Yeah, look at the language that we were happy with there.
Mhm. I can tell everybody that today natural gas has gone up to 1.1 cents per therm, which is about a 50% jump. Actually, about a 60% jump.
I will put on an extra sweater.
I didn't get the wood stove going.
Get the wood stove going. Exactly. It's going up. Eversource came up today.
Yeah, I think oil was $6.06 a gallon the other day. So
yeah. Okay, I was gonna say look at 100 Chestnut, and I will take that element from there. Building will be solar ready, and as earlier stated, there will be solar within 2 years of.
Yeah, then if you can just look at the language that we were already happy with, Peter.
Yeah, I'm just gonna copy and paste it from the other decisions. And
don't need to reinvent the wheel. Yeah.
Yep. And I'll take care of that.
It was just a reminder that the other project had outdoor grill area that needed gas line, but this project doesn't have. So as long as you copy only the commercial space that probably needs gas line.
That's the things that are applicable. Yeah. Okay.
This is just an element: low flow faucets, central heat pumps, low TV. Can I move on to the special permit criteria?
Yes.
Okay, so here is the community needs, community needs served by the proposal. This is the finding, number 1, the planning board finds the applicant's proposal to develop a primary residential building on the site serves the community needs for the housing and the redevelopment of the vacant site. The commercial aspect of the building will serve the commercial quarter of Pond Street. Item number B is traffic flow and safety, including parking and loading. The new element from our last meeting is drafted in blue. I will not subject everyone for me to read this out loud, but I think everyone can kind of do it on their own. Once, twice, any changes?
Is it appropriate in this section to have something about the Hudson more access to their property?
Sure.
Traffic flow and safety. I'm not sure how to put that in there, but that has been agreed to between the two property owners.
Okay, I can add something. I'll add some verbiage and then send it out. Adequacy of utilities and other public services. This is fairly technical, and this is language which was received by our sewer consultant on what needs to happen regarding the connection of the bypass sewer pipeline, which is going to connect the Ledgmere station to Brackett Road pump station. Please note that this language is being reviewed by our DPW and our water and sewer department as we speak. So this may not be final, but it is what was provided to me from our consultant.
I will trust their analysis of that text.
Okay. And Ben and Matt, I'll share this with you, obviously, as soon as possible.
Okay.
Neighborhood character and social structure. Finding in blue.
I'm okay with that.
E, impacts on the natural environment. Findings in blue.
Is this a place where we, or maybe somewhere else where we have the additional plantings to shield the neighbors on the back? Or is there any other location where that, because that's an important part of the whole thing.
I would put that in
neighborhood character.
Yeah, because they are committed to completing that wall of trees to shield the neighbors in the back.
Maybe I was looking at the special permit criteria, letter D. Maybe that would fit under neighborhood character, kind of protecting the neighbors. No, I think you're still going down though. So, yeah, so
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm too far down.
Right up, right after the purple.
Yeah. Okay.
Right there. That's just a suggestion of I'm not married to it if someone has a better place for it.
I'll add something.
Okay.
That, impacts on the natural environment. I think we went over this. Did we? No.
Yeah.
On that fiscal impact, I kind of feel like we have to be really careful since we have not yet gotten to kind of test out, run, understand our impact tool. And I think I don't like putting numbers that we don't really have a good way to stand behind.
Okay.
I mean, I personally can't vote on this one, so I won't be standing behind it. But as a practice, I think we have to own what we're writing.
Sure. I'll rework this.
Well, would it be appropriate to say where those numbers are coming from?
So I can explain.
The project
numbers
is
came
forecasted
from
by who?
These four. We kind of looked at the school age children, this and that, but also our fiscal impact tool, which was updated by the gentleman for the 10 to 60 Main Street. In comparison, he did the numbers for this project as well as 100 Chestnut Street. And so these numbers came from that report.
Okay.
And I think it's important to put it because it's one of the criteria, but I think to satisfy what Kate brings up, which makes sense to me, if you can clarify that these aren't just estimates based on this and that type of analysis.
Well, especially since we still have on our plate to really vet that. What costs are in, not in. I think we're not there yet. So we just should be careful.
But whatever it is, at least if it's clarified that it's an estimate and what it's based on, then it's clear that was kind of the extent of due diligence that can be added to this point.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll rework it. And number 9, Pond Street mixed use overlay district criteria.
Yeah, I think by this time, a lot of the information becomes repeated from other criteria.
That is true. Obviously, I think we're not voting on this tonight, so I'm happy to send this out to the board as soon as possible, and everyone can kind of go through it at their own time, if that's appropriate.
Yep, to put all the corrections in.
Would you like me to stop sharing my screen, or you're on here and you needed to stop?
Oh, sorry. I think we should keep going through the site plan review criteria. Aren't they coming up next?
Yeah, so we still need to, we're still working to expand that out, the site view. Excuse me. So we are on the Pond Street mixed use overlay district criteria. The site plan is really repetitive, and we still haven't built that out.
Yeah, these are the ones I said that are kind of repetitive from things that we've already discussed. You know, talking about the Woolnerf and parking and I think the site plan review criteria are different but very specific.
And Tricia, these are elements that we just haven't had a chance to build out. So I can go through a blank sheet and we can kind of put some notes on them if that's appropriate.
Yeah, I think maybe we should, because like some of them are just, I mean, some of them are just like, these are the ones that are minimize use of wetlands where there are no wetlands, right? They are just kind of sometimes very simple like that. Yeah. Sometimes they're kind of yes, no questions, right?
Yep.
So some of these I don't. No, I mean you already have that there.
Yeah, no, I do.
So the answer is kind of already there. Just none of those things exist on that site, right? Where there are no scenic views present. You know, not that I observed anyway.
Unique and natural features.
Yeah, I mean, a previously developed site, so whatever natural features were there are long gone.
D speaks to the existing trees. Obviously, there was a fairly large dirt pile for some time.
So this should mention something about the trees to be the mature evergreens, right, on the back of the site that will be maintained. I don't think there are a whole lot of trees growing in the middle of the site, right? Because it was just a big dump, pile for dirt, right? Like any other trees in there kind of grew randomly. I remember walking through there, but it's been a while.
Looks like it was like a material storage.
Yeah, I think so. And so there's a small slope, but it's a fairly flat site besides that berm on the back side.
Open space, we were talking about the Wooner.
Kate, I believe on an earlier project you talked about a definition of open space. Is that right? Am my memory? Basically saying that you're not maintaining open space because it's already disturbed. Was something like that? Do you know what I'm?
Well, I think that we have to be. It was counting like landscaping as like open space or something, and I think there is kind of a real definition, which probably the Wooner meets, but we should probably definitely understand that.
Okay. Can you see if there's anything printed on that, Peter? I can look too, just to, what is the definition of open space? Like,
So I just looked at, I have the bylaw in front of me and I can just read verbatim.
Okay.
Open space defined in our bylaws is a lot area not covered by any structures other than a swimming pool and not used for drives, parking, or storage, but including balconies and any roof area developed for recreation. If not part of a structure or paved, it shall be kept sustainable with vegetative cover, pine needles, bark, and other organic materials. I doubt that's
but a rooftop? Oh.
It says roof area, but including balconies and other roof areas developed for recreation. So if you had a rooftop, green garden roof, you could cover that. That would fall under open space.
Okay.
Under our definition.
Okay. So it includes maybe the vegetated part of the Wooner, but not maybe the drive part.
The paved area.
Though the paved area kind of becomes pedestrian. So, okay. Well, we'll need some verbiage for that, I guess, to maybe describe that a little bit better.
I'll make note of that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a good point. It doesn't literally meet our definition, but I think it meets the intent. So we'll have to make sure that's kind of spelled out.
Yeah, definition is a little strange when it includes balconies.
We'll add that to the zoning update list.
Yeah, it's not what you would, it's not how I would think about open space, but I guess if I'm in an apartment, maybe I would consider that open space.
So this, I wouldn't think this has to be said, but I mean, I can show you places that like screening means you don't actually see the dumpsters, or I feel strongly about that. If the rest of the board doesn't care, then it doesn't matter. But I think you shouldn't put up screening and then still be able to see it. And I can show you several places in town that that is not the case. So maybe if anyone else cares, I'd like to see that defined, even though you would think you wouldn't have to.
Sorry, Kate, are you saying that we should have?
So there's, I live near a couple places. You can drive down 126 and there's screening around a dumpster, but you can still see dumpster above the screening. So I don't think that's sort of the intent of screening. It should actually cover it, right? The dumpster, if that's what we're saying.
Is that in relation to the height, I guess? Is that what you're trying to?
Yeah. And I mean, I think we should, but again, if nobody else feels strongly about it.
So Ben and Matt, how are we covering that? Maybe it's something that the design review committee talked about, but we didn't specifically. Like, we have it screened. It's tall enough.
We actually have it in a fenced enclosure. And if the fence needs to be, I mean, you're probably thinking of instances where fences are along property lines and they can't be any higher than 6 feet legally. But in this particular case, our fence is around the dumpster. So if it needs to be 8 feet, it could be 8 feet.
Okay. Yeah, no, there's, you can drive down 126 and there's at least 2 places where the dumpster's above the dumpster screening. So,
yeah, I'm sure most times it's really just to keep people out or from dumping private garbage into dumpsters. But yeah, I mean, if we can make sure it's here, we can make sure it's in a condition, you know, that it's adequately screened as intended. So we look for that in the conditions too, Peter.
Mm-hmm. I think I made a note, but I'll flesh it out.
I think also you can take out objectionable features such as garage parking, which I don't think we have any garage parking, so just take out garage.
This obviously speaks for itself. G. Jumping to H.
Can you scroll back up to G there, Peter? Yeah, right there. See how you have 2 things in. Yeah, that where it starts electric telephone, that should be another paragraph. That's a whole different finding, right? They can fix the lettering on it later. There you go.
Oh, fix itself. Yeah. Yeah.
And then
it looks like K will have to tweak because there are some dispensations.
Yes. Yeah, for the parking spot size for the loading dock.
Okay, this ends L. And obviously and I can expand this to include the Pond Street overlay.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that is really maybe more governing than as a bylaw than the comprehensive plan.
And I'll put some information in about the 126 done by the CCO.
Okay, so we're going to need this document filled out and corrected.
Yeah.
And then
So
what's that?
I think my hope is to fill out to edit the special permit and to build out the conditions for the site plan, and then I will send those back out. So I think by the end of hopefully not next week, but just due to a busy week, by I think the end of the week prior leading up to Thanksgiving, we should have full 2 working documents for this project.
So that's I'm just looking at when this is.
My goal is going to have by the week of the I would say by Thanksgiving.
I was going to say before Thanksgiving.
Before Thanksgiving, we're going to have 2 full working documents.
Yeah, I think if we can get them, in the Thursday, Friday after meeting, that would be best.
I think that's a very doable thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Please note, I'm going to be on vacation next Monday, Tuesday, not to drop the ball on everybody. But I had a planned trip to get away to Florida, so I will not be in the office on Monday. But the Hurricane Nicole, pushed our plans around a little bit. So we're taking our 2 girls to Disney for the first time. So
nice.
Fun time. Every dad's done it. I see your smirk, Jen and Marcella. And Kevin, you're just behind me. I'll let you know how it goes.
All right. Is there anything?
And Peter, could you share that document even in the format it is now with us, so we can?
I will.
Just see if there's any. We can make sure there's nothing that's going to flag out to us either. So.
Yep. And please note that Dan and Mauer and Doug Small are reviewing the sewer stuff. So, but that was just dropped in as verbiage from Greg Outreach.
Right. It's just I've never seen that verbiage, so I'd like to see what it says. So that's all.
I'll send it to you. Don't worry about it. After this meeting, I'll shoot it out before I log out.
Thank you.
Yeah, you got it. All right.
Any other requests from the planning board to the applicant? That any other information they need at this time that hasn't already been discussed? All right, then we will look to continue to our next meeting, Peter, which is December 1st. December 1st?
Yep.
Okay.
Make a motion to continue the 501 Pond Street hearing to the planning board meeting December 1st.
Taking that.
All right, a roll call vote.
Deepa Venkatai.
Marcel Barjona, aye.
Catherine Jerzyk, aye.
And Tricia Kendall, aye. So we will see you on December 1st.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Peter, you want to call Anna?
Yes, I will do that.
I don't think we're wrapping up our agenda here.
When we do this, I'm just gonna email.
While we're waiting for Anna, can we just go ahead and continue? Well, I don't know. Should we wait?
We can do that without her because she's not going to vote on that at 3:01.
Where are we moving? First, we have McDonald's. Where are we moving that to?
So McDonald's, I would like to move. I'm just going to put it out there. December 1st is going to be a very full meeting. And I can tell you, I would like to put them on as soon as possible because, well, I think December 1st or the 15th are appropriate. At this point, I don't think either meeting will be, I think where we are in the calendar year, I think that they'll probably are waiting for a spring construction. So we have a lot of things on for the December 1st.
Are you saying, can we put them on the 15th? Can we put them in January? What are they?
I'm going to say the 15th, if that's okay with everybody.
It's fine with me.
Okay.
All right, so I will make a motion to continue the 225 Pond Street special permit site plan review to December 15th.
Second.
Thank you. Call vote.
Aye.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcelo Hona, aye.
Catherine Durzik, aye.
And Tricia Kendall, aye. So that is continued. And 301 Pond Street, we're pushing that out to January. Is that right?
Correct. And I'm sorry, Anna, we came back. But yes, they requested a continuance until the first meeting in January, which will be on January 12th. And
okay,
that would be appropriate.
All right. So Kevin, you'll be in on this vote. I'll make a motion to continue the 301 Pond Street special permit and site plan review to the meeting of January 12th.
I'll second it.
And a roll call vote.
Aye.
Marcelo Hona, aye.
Catherine Durzik, aye.
Aye.
And Tricia Kendall, aye. So that is continued. All right. So we are down to our other topics. I don't think there's anything new in the planning topics, is there, Peter? We usually don't have a chance even to look at these.
We do not typically. Excuse me. Planning topics. MBTA communities is the big one. Obviously, we're still paying attention to that, and I think that's going to have to be brought up in the new year on how we move forward with the MBTA communities. But to this point, we're still in compliance, and that's what we need to start looking at. Obviously, with a building moratorium that we heard tonight and having be compliant for MBTA zoning, I think it's something that we really need to kind of flesh out on what the necessary steps are for that one. But that's still on our agenda, and we should still be kind of looking at that into the future. Economic impact tool, again, I think Catherine, you stated that that's something on our agenda that we are needing to dive deeper into.
Who should be, question for everybody, getting in like another speaker like we did Jim Adams. What do we want to go through first? What's higher on our agenda? Understanding more about the sewer moratorium, or talking about the economic impact tool? Which one do we want to do first? Any strong feelings?
Well, I think I would say the economic impact tool, because I think that can be really useful even on some of these findings if we can get our arms around that. And the sewer moratorium is going on, and they're not going to have all the findings for that. So I'm extremely interested in the water or sewer in that conversation. But I think because of the moratorium, we could take the impact tool slightly ahead.
I agree with Kate.
Okay. I'm fine with that. Can we, would that be scheduling, what was his name again? The guy who created the tool?
His name is Craig, but he is actually working as a consultant to 10 to 15 minutes.
Yeah. So how would we best do that, I guess? How would we best understand this tool?
I think I should.
Oh, go ahead here.
Please.
No, go ahead.
I think I'm just brainstorming and saying I think I should send it out to everybody. It's an Excel sheet. We should all just put our eyes on it and take a few minutes to say, okay, this is what it is. And then we could try to do some trial and error on how to walk through certain projects and maybe just to get a better understanding of what data needs to be gathered and implemented and they're plugged into such a tool. And then maybe we can talk about how it should be used from our standpoint and how it should be updated. My thoughts is it's a very complicated tool. You know, it's not very complicated, but there are some nuances to it and some data and some obviously labor statistics and items of that nature. So it does take an expert to do some understand how it's developed and what the output is. And obviously I think Craig Seymour did a great evaluation for us at the last 10 to 15 Main Street open hearing. But does anybody have any input or ideas? You know, I'm happy to reach out to some other folks on economic development.
So I think it depends on how we want to use it. You know, I think we need to brainstorm as a board at some point. What is the use of this tool on a project, and better understand it. And I also feel like he could be a valuable resource to us as we start about the comprehensive plan. So, you know, I was thinking more generally bringing him in to talk about his thoughts on the comprehensive plan process and how his skill set could assist us. And maybe using a former project data point as a way to walk us through, you know, how he would apply that to a project. I can see some use to that as we start thinking about the moratorium and comprehensive planning. But I'm still fuzzy on how we would use it as a board. And I'd like to hear from other members of the board as to what they envision with that tool.
I think based on what Peter just described and your comments, and I think the tool, obviously we don't need to know all the intricacies of a massive Excel spreadsheet of how it works, but what we need to know is what data points it takes into consideration and what are the the cross referencing of data that it does to come up with the output. I think ultimately what we're looking for is to make sure that when we apply it to a project that we understand the margin of accuracy of the output of that tool. Other than that, there's not much for us to do. I think having an expert do it and us understanding where it came from, what ranges, if it tells us that it's going to be this money or whatever in taxes, what is the range of accuracy of that? I think those are the elements in terms of planning. What we're trying to do is to assess the merits of an application relative to the criteria. So I wouldn't try to go much deeper than that because personally, I'm really bad at math. So I'm gonna have to trust somebody to do it right.
And I don't think we should get into the weeds of it as well, right? It feels like we should get a big picture to make sure that we are making educated guess when it comes to a point versus getting into actual working of that because you just need to know the parameters that may affect some of our decision making. Because otherwise, if you start to get into examples and get into the weeds, that can be a whole session by itself.
Yeah, and I don't think that's an area of expertise either. So I agree, it has to be big picture and it has to be just geared to what's the applicability on the merits of an application.
I'd be interested if it is something that, which you seem to apply, that is just easily emailed and appropriate to share. I'd be curious just to see what it is. Like I didn't know it was just a spreadsheet. I had in my mind kind of a like software or something, you know. So I'd be curious to kind of just to see it and play around with a copy of it to see what it does. So if that's appropriate, whoever wants to could do that. Whoever doesn't.
I mean, I think a working session would be great to understand it. Can we take a prior project and have him show us how to use it? Is that something we could do?
I think if it's on a personal basis, yes. I personally don't think it would be. I think for someone that wants to get into the details, that could be done separate from the use of funding of the board for that.
Why don't you send it? I mean, so Peter, I think you said that you could send it out. Is that appropriate thing to do?
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So
I'm looking for it. I just gotta grab for my hand.
Why don't you send it out, you know, to the board? If you don't want to look at it, just throw it away. Kate, I imagine, will click on it and open that thing right up.
Well, so this is the thing. I think everyone seems to agree we want something consistent, right? And there's a tool that we might feel is useful and we might feel is too much, because at one point Peter and Emma were working on a simpler spreadsheet that might serve us just fine. I think the beauty of this particular thing is we actually have some projects that were built since this was made, and we can say, is it any good? Like I'm, you know, I don't know that I'm good at math either, Marcelo, but I know enough to be suspicious and understand all the data, right? Do you like the data in? It's garbage in, garbage out, right? So I think there's a lot of data points. We have to know what it's using and what it's giving, but I do feel like this would be a great tool once that's all understood. We have to provide findings on every decision on special permits. And if we can get it standardized and the public understands that, you know, it might be saying that the tax rate, I don't know who generates those, the input about how much taxes, right, it's projected. And so that's related to that. But if we can hone those in and have a really good standard way to present that, I think that's the goal for me, I think, and to give that transparency to the public.
I would say send it out, and those of us that are a little curious can play around with it a little bit and report back to the group, and then we'll figure out our next step. Once I don't even know how to react, because I just can't get a visual on what this thing is like. So once we do that, those of us who have looked at it can kind of report back and maybe have a better feel of what would help the group as a whole, without making everyone go through a math lesson or a spreadsheet seminar. Does that sound okay? Then we'll take it in the next step. Okay. All right, so we'll do that, but we'll still keep in mind the sewer moratorium to have a better understanding of the sewer and water system too, but maybe we'll do that in January. Reports from board members and town planner. There's going to be something from CPC coming up at town meeting, funding for some repairs and maintenance replacements, things on the school fields, which are getting to be in pretty bad shape. And like I said, it was an interesting discussion with CPC that we had at our last meeting, because it talked about kind of really my role there as the representative is really to be keeping an eye out for things that the planning board would like to do that they can pay for. right? Which I would think that's kind of, I don't know, that that wasn't the way I was thinking it was working. So for instance, when we were talking about taking down trees along scenic roads that are dead or whatever, and Anna had said, hey, we should replace every tree. And Marcella said we should put 2 trees for everyone that comes down. But apparently DPW has no money. But the CPC does. They do have money. And no one applies for it. So that could be something that we say, hey, we would like, you know, whatever it is, $10,000 to go to the DPW every year to replenish trees. You know, we could have an idea that way. Or when projects come up that we wish we had an affordable housing component, but they don't, CPC money can be used for to support affordable housing, right? And so they're just kind of waiting to be asked because the money is just sitting there. But yeah, they're kind of flush with cash.
Can the money be utilized for public components of the comprehensive plan process? In other words, I just don't know what the regulations say, but I'm thinking we're about to undertake a very extensive process and money's going to be needed and we're going to need public process. Obviously,
I'm going to say probably no, but okay. I can ask. Because a similar question came up. I remember and the answer was no, but it wasn't this specific question.
Yeah.
I can find out if that meets one of the criteria of the different buckets, because the money in CPC is in different buckets.
Yeah.
Affordable housing, recreation, open space, and you have to take it out of the right bucket. But if there's no bucket for it, you can't take it out. So.
But as far as, you know, the tree piece, I think we keep kind of dancing around that issue. And certainly if CPC funds allows for planting of trees in a town, then we need to explore the mechanics of how to make that happen.
Yeah.
That seems like a very realistic project to undertake. And if you need assistance, Trish, in figuring that out, how to do it, I'm more than happy to assist you.
Well, the first question would just be to the CPC. It's the people on there who have been on there a while and know it much better than I'm still getting my feet wet here. But
I don't know if it needs to be like done by a nonprofit or, you know,
right.
If we have to like how the whole thing works. Obviously, we have community groups in town that are involved in the town forest and all that. Would they need to file it? Like those mechanics to me are not so clear.
It's like in this case, the one that's coming up, like the school's facility director. Maybe that's DPW as well, because it was Roy Carrera asking for money for the school fields, you know, to replace dugouts and to have a new scoreboard, things like that. And they have money for that under recreation, right? Going to come up at town meeting. So in the same way, DPW, I assume, could say, hey, could we have some money for trees?
Yeah.
So, but it's just kind of a heads up to everyone to have that thinking that, you know, planning board has no budget, right?
Yeah.
But if something comes up that we would really wish would happen, if it fits one of these buckets, they're looking for ways to benefit the town with the money that they have.
Yeah.
Which we contribute to.
I think for me, the most fascinating part is the public-private connection. So in other words, when I see private projects, like a development project that we handle, and it has some sort of component and we start negotiating, oh, can you build I don't know, I'll use Avenue of the Americas project, Chestnut Street. Can you put, you know, a shelter for the bus here or a crosswalk over here for the trail or whatever? I do wonder if some of those elements can be CDC money. CPC money. And I just don't know how that intersects with an actual development. Like, can we do it in that context? Can we as a planning board say, okay, this piece of it is the developers and this piece we want to do. We want to take care of, and I would love to find the answer, because if we have some say in that, I can see how we can augment some of these projects where maybe we're not comfortable asking the private developer to do something that really is truly ours. So the other thing I can think of, like the Starbucks project that's coming up, I started thinking about all of that public green space right across the street from the Starbucks. And obviously asking that developer to augment or improve that already public space may not be realistic, but having CPC money as part of that project to kind of make that entire area more community oriented, there might be a wonderful way to partner town and Starbucks, right? Where the town would do the CPC money to kind of augment the public space around the development. Those are some of the things I think about, and I just don't know how communities do that with CPC money. And I don't know if Peter can help figure that out, because I think as a board, it would really strengthen our work. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah. I'm just starting to figure it out, and I'll report back more as I learn more, but I just kind of wanted to put that out there as far as that we can dip into, but I'll learn more about it and keep coming back with more info. I was just surprised. I didn't really know it worked that way. So
I'm happy to jump into CPA. I used to work a lot within CPA back in when I worked in the town of Hanover. So I agree that the use of tree replacement on scenic roads is a perfect example of the use of the CPA fund. You know, and it's just really about, I think sometimes the hardest thing for is just project management, fund management, right? Because that's just a component of CPA funding, you know. But if we could get, you know, the planning board could request X number of dollars sunsetting every year, right? So if we only use, say it was $10,000, maybe $5,000 for tree replacement on scenic ways, because there was no need, right? There was no trimming of trees indoor. This going to happen. That $5,000 could just go back to the CPA fund, and then we could just reboot it the next year at a town meeting. But it would take a town meeting to vote, because that's just the mechanisms of CPA.
I mean, would that be something that, I mean, since scenic routes is one of our items for tonight, like, is that something we as a board could decide today to have Peter draft for our review? I mean, I think it'd be great to consider it for spring town meeting, in time for spring, so we can actually plant some trees this time. But to me, that seems like a great thing to think about and actually drafting.
You know, maybe Peter and I can work with the sustainability coordinator and with Aaron Ladd, who chairs the CPC, and you know, figure out how that happens. So,
because I recall we talked also about doing an outreach as part of the scenic route work. We wanted to reach out to local communities on those routes. We wanted to educate the public, which is like some kind of mailing or So I feel like there's a whole component to this that could be covered by this if it's appropriate, not just the trees, but also the outreach.
Yep, that's been on the agenda a long time. So can we continue on that process, Peter, with the new sustainability person?
Yes, Samantha is definitely kind of getting into sustainable aspects, but that's something that I can reboot and try to get something out to the planning board.
Okay.
Awesome.
In terms of planning, can we initiate the process? I don't know what it takes to amend the bylaws, maybe in the next public meeting, to fix this parking dimensional criteria thing that we come across every single time.
Yeah, that's something that we can do at annual town meeting. I think typically typical zoning changes like that usually wait till annual town meeting, and then really kind of specialty with the building board code would go on. But
we have to vote. As a planning board, we would have to vote first on it, right?
Correct. It's going to have to be a public hearing process as we go tonight.
So we should put it on some agenda.
Okay.
Might be good to have an agenda item that's sort of like zoning role of the planning board and what zoning items are percolating in our minds. I've certainly been thinking a lot about accessory dwelling and making that piece of our bylaw a lot stronger so that we can actually motivate accessory dwellings in Ashland rather than just having a bylaw that seems kind of not particularly used. I'm sure others others on the board have other bylaw pieces that they would love to take on. And I feel like we as a board have never had time to start thinking that way. And now that we're initiating a comprehensive plan process, it would be helpful for us as a board to talk about our role in zoning, to better understand our role and maybe brainstorm items that we want to initiate in the next 2 years and not wait. That might be a little bit more urgent.
I just have I have an Ashland accessory dwelling unit project, so I know that has just gone through that process. So I know a lot about that, and I'm happy to happy to talk about that as well, about how it might be, what it does now, and how it could be different.
So along that lines, can we just take a little higher level look and have it like a zoning working group or working document? Because I feel like we're just maybe this meeting, because some things got continued, we have a little bit of time to talk about it. But we, the 6 of us, 7 with Peter and 8 with Emma, shouldn't be doing this in a vacuum without the public. And so the more notice the public has that we're trying to be active thinking about zoning and publicizing that, I think we have to get there. So I think I would like to see that in a broader context.
But we're not doing it without the public. I mean, these are public meetings.
Well,
no, what I'm on the agenda.
That's like, okay, people to try to engage them is just because I'm having a public meeting about parking isn't going to work, right? We have to do better than that. And you're kind of piloting and spreading that along. I mean, I guess I'll just full disclosure. I took a training last night from the Citizens Planner Training Collaborative that was like planning with community engagement, right? And the very honest thing was this professor at MIT, the very least likely to get public engagement is actually a hearing. So that's not your way to get public engagement. We have to do that, but that is absolutely not the way to get the public. So I think both for the board and the public, we should start at a high level for that.
I think that's
I'm just not sure. Okay,
I was going to say it'd be great to learn what are suggested ways. We don't have to go into it tonight, but what are suggested ways of reaching out to the public that fits our schedule and our capacity.
But also to fit what the intent of the planning board is. I think trying to become an outreach body is probably, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I'm not sure that is necessarily the objective of a planning board. In full extent, not that doesn't happen or cannot happen. I'm just saying changing the objective of what we're trying to do here and putting our time on that may not be the best approach in my opinion.
It is a key component of a comprehensive plan, which is our job.
Yeah, a comprehensive plan, I get it.
Yeah, which we're about to undertake for 2 years. I mean, Kate, would you be willing, this training you took yesterday or whatever day it was, can you create a memo for us as to what you learned and share it with Peter? I think it'll be helpful to see it in writing, at least for me, to understand what points and
I can they gave a PowerPoint slide which has some good stuff. I'm kind of waiting for the video because he was a really excellent speaker. Just more points than on his slides, but I guess like he would argue, Marcelo, that like the planning is public is critical to planning. So if we're only reviewing applications, then we follow this process and we have a hearing. But if we're planning, we do need to involve the public.
So like planning, meaning like bylaw changes or shifting our sense of how we're going to develop in the community.
Correct.
But if there's specific ideas in the presentation that were shared, I'd love to see that, like a little summary just for learning. I feel like we're jumping around different topics. Tricia, would it be okay to talk about the comprehensive plan? I think it's one of the topics, and get an update from Peter as to what happened at the select board. I thought I could listen in, but I could not. Did they approve our timeline? Where are we?
I listened to it. I listened to it after. I listened to it this morning, the meeting. Peter, you weren't at the meeting, were you?
I was not able to attend, no.
Yeah, but I listened to it, and they didn't even discuss any changes in either the timeline or the letter. So I think that was all good to go. mostly they were just talking about the town meeting itself, and it was a pretty short discussion, about they were going to ask what's his name?
Adam.
Ask Adam for time and opportunity to present it, see what he was willing to give, and then see who was going to actually put the slides together. Brandy mentioned both you and Kate that you had an interest maybe in working on it. I think and then that maybe someone from the planning board and someone from the select board would both present the warrant. So and that was really about it.
So what are the next steps of that? Should Kate and myself reach out to Brandy? I think Yolanda was also interested in being part of that. How do we want to, what's the next step on this?
Well, I think we formally made a subcommittee last time, didn't we, Peter? I think we did. So I think you guys could, reach out to Brandy. That would be okay, right? If Anna reached out to Brandy and Yolanda, and see if that's, to make sure we're ready for town meeting.
Yep. So the only thought I had separate from town meeting is I would imagine the moderator is going to give us only a few minutes. It's going to be a very short and dirty kind of, it could be 3 minutes.
Cut you off mid-sentence, he will.
It could be like, we're going to do a comprehensive plan, all done. So in light of how short it's going to be, I wanted to introduce an idea to the planning board that maybe on the comprehensive plan, we should consider, because the comprehensive plan was born out of this board, right? We should think about having a public forum to give the public a lot more detail and to really get the public excited about the plan and the timeline and all the nitty gritty. And I can see there could be a benefit to that, so that the public has a real opportunity to ask questions and offer input as to the process, and engage as to kind of, hey, this is what we're doing. Here's our timeline. Here's the next steps. You could be on the steering committee. You could do this. You could do that. Get them excited.
Are you talking about the next 5 days?
No, in the next, let's say 3 months.
Okay.
That the planning board consider doing a comprehensive plan forum for the public. It would, in the form of a hearing. We could do it jointly with the select board, or maybe it could be a planning board led with the select board members there who are involved in the steering committee or the whatever committee, the bigger committee. I forget the name of it. However we do it, I'm just throwing out the idea that I think the planning board is in a good place because we started this process and we're very familiar with it, to give the public a chance for a more thorough understanding other than 3 minutes at town meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that might be something actually that once we choose that steering committee or what do we call it? The
project management, I guess.
Project management committee, whatever. Maybe that's something that's organized by a group and have a special meeting for it. I think you'll need to send out invitations to all the committees, inviting them to come because we'll want their input, and as well as sending out invitations to the general public, people that that might be interested, because if you just post it, no one's going to show. No one's,
Agreed. Yeah.
You need a special invitation, and then everyone obviously is welcome. But you might have an empty room if you just post it. And they're done that.
Yeah, and we can explore that. We can explore that more. I just wanted to throw it out there. And then the other thing I wanted to kind of throw out there is the marketing of it. I think it's important for a comprehensive plan to have that branding as soon as possible. And I don't know, Peter, if you and Michael have had a chance to brainstorm about that at all, but I feel like that's a worthy discussion to have as soon as possible, so that when we announce, we're going to start as a community to talk about this. The more the public starts to see visuals of what this is, as a brand, the better.
No, I think the number one thing is obviously the vote at town meeting, and then I think it's really out. Then we can start talking about building this committee and building an RFP out. I think I remember in the last communities when we kind of kicked it off, a letter kind of came out and was drafted from the planning board and the select board in this instance, which would be a joint letter, which kind of outlined the public, outlined the development of such a, master plan committee and to try to, drum up interest. And, that letter was sent out to the chair of each board in the town. And obviously there was a newspaper article drafted, in Ashland. It would probably go out through local town pages. And that's just kind of as a first step. I think that would be appropriate.
And I think for me, as I've kind of said from the beginning, that this is something primarily that happens that obviously begins with planning board, but it happens outside of planning board. So I think is when we have that management committee that, and then as they grow the steering committee, that's the group that leads this effort, but doesn't look for it to happen inside of, our plate is full and we want to start looking at these zoning issues and planning issues and other things coming up. So, that's kind of from the beginning, that this happens in its own group with support from the planning board, but not embedded in the planning board. So anyway, so I think as soon as we get through town meeting, we should start to, I assume that group will start to be formed. And it's coming up real fast. So, right. Is there anything else on that list of committees that we need to report on tonight, or is there anything we need to cover?
Any applications received? I don't know if I think we're ready for administrative matters, right?
Just to note, we've had a lot of applications come in. We have a couple cell phone towers that need to be heard, and that's going to be on the December 1st meeting. Cell phone towers, 30-foot Albert Ray. They're going to be taking off old equipment, putting up new equipment. This kind of falls under that Spectrum Act of the FCC. However, we here in Ashland do still require public hearings.
Yeah.
And so that is going to be a big part of that agenda, just to make that note. And then on the second case is because of the building moratorium, we've had a couple properties file preliminary subdivisions. Preliminary subdivision can be filed as a zoning tactic, a free zoning. And so within the last 2 days, I've received four applications. 2 were accepted and 2 were not because they did not have updated abutters list. So with that said, we're going to have a pretty full agenda moving forward in the upcoming months.
Okay.
That is all I had to say, and we did get the meeting minutes out. So if anybody will have to lead the discussion on those, I'm happy to take notes.
And
just have any, go ahead.
I was just going to, I don't have anything on the agenda. I was just going to throw in the reminder that the planning board meetings are the 1st and the 15th, right? So that is,
yep, the 1st, the 15th, and then we will be meeting on January 12th. So we'll have about a gap in there for the Christmas. I think Hanukkah starts right after the 15th. And so we'll have a good chunk of time there to celebrate.
Okay. I had no changes on the meeting minutes.
I didn't either.
I'm good as well. It was 6 pages. That's a lot.
You didn't have to type it, so we're lucky.
Do we want to make a motion to? I can make a motion to approve the minutes from September 22nd, 2022 as is.
I second it.
All right, and a roll call vote.
Deepa Venkatai.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcelo Hona, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
And Trisha Kendall, aye. So that passes. I will make a motion.
Before we adjourn, because we're talking about future meetings, is there any interest in considering making some of our meetings in person next year? Some, not necessarily all, so that we can be more present to one another and to the public. I think there's a benefit to in-person interaction that I certainly noticed on Monday. I think it's going to make our working relationship as a board much stronger, and frankly, I think our meetings will get shorter.
Well, I was going to put that as a precondition.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's the nature. I mean, we might end up socializing more by choice rather than sitting in our bedrooms and living rooms all night.
Yeah, but we need to find a way to get to the point a little faster. Sometimes I feel we extend some things beyond the matters. So if it's in person, I'm all for it.
Maybe we just try it in January for a few meetings. I don't want to put pressure, because I think there's also a balance that happens, at least for me at home with my daughter, where there's a benefit to being here.
Yep, we can try it in January. It may need to be hybrid because I may be in Iowa for one or both of those meetings, but we could do it hybrid. That it seems to be working for the select board.
Exactly. And I should be clear, we keep it hybrid, just like the select board, so that if anybody cannot be there in person, encourage in person, don't require it, and just start to motivate ourselves. If the majority of us are in person, I think it would really help our board. Because
all right. On that note, we got it.
Okay. Jordan.
All right. So on that note, I will make a motion to adjourn at 10:41.
I'll second it.
Oh, what, Peter?
I forgot to tell everybody. I did post a meeting for next Wednesday, leading up to town meeting, just to meet at 6:30 if the board decides to prior to town meeting. It's just an annual typical thing I do. So if we do want to discuss something, we can meet, discuss, and go over the building moratorium one more time. But that is something that we can do just in the lobby walking into town meeting. So
yeah, often the boards reserve that time just in case there's something they need to meet about right before, but so don't let it scare you.
So yes, please.
All right.
That seems reasonable.
All right, so roll call vote.
Aye.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcelo, aye.
Trisha, aye.
Everyone, aye.
And Trisha Kendall, aye. All right, the 4:11.
Bye, guys.
Happy Thanksgiving.
You too.
You too. Safe travels, Disney.
Thank you. I sent out the economic development tool.
Cool.
Okay, take a look.